Hi guys, it's me ChazzaHD and welcome to race day for the 2024 Qatar Grand Prix, the penultimate race of course, the longest Formula One season of all time. And there is plenty to be decided today. Whether it will get officially decided in this Grand Prix, we'll have to find out in regarding the Constructors' Championship and the battle there between McLaren and Ferrari and technically Red Bull, even though Red Bull are too far away really to be winning the Constructors' Championship, given we've only got a couple races to go. But yeah, with the grid we have as well, this is going to be, I think, definitely a good race. Like maybe a 7 out of 10 type of Grand Prix, kind of like we got in Las Vegas, where all of the top teams were all on similar-ish pace, and we all, saw plenty of battles through the race, overtaking, and just it constantly evolving as the race went on. That's what I think we're going to see pretty much in this Grand Prix. The obviously one thing that did make the Las Vegas Grand Prix quite interesting was we had a couple pit stops for pretty much everyone in that Grand Prix. Now today, probably we could get a couple pit stops per team, but it is going to be very interesting to see who does what on strategy. Of course, we'll get into that in this build-up in regards to what Pirelli have said is the best race strategy for this Qatar Grand Prix. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Qualifying yesterday was good. The top few cars on the grid were pretty close. And I think this race, if you look at that top 7, I'd say any really of the top 7 could finish on the podium. I won't say any of the top 7 could win the race necessarily. I think really in terms of who could win the race, I think we're looking at probably the top 5 at most in terms of who could win this Qatar Grand Prix. But yeah, given how close things are right now between Mercedes, McLaren, Red Bull and Ferrari, it's going to be definitely a very interesting Grand Prix. Of course, 57 laps it will be in just under 2 hours from now, and I cannot wait to get into it. And of course, the championship permutations regarding the fight for the constructors between McLaren and Ferrari, I will get into those right before the race begins, so you guys know what McLaren need to do to win the Constructors' Championship today. And I've already had a look, obviously, at the permutations, and it's doable for McLaren to win the championship today, but they are probably going to have to win the race, at least win the race, to realistically get the Constructors' Championship won today. And McLaren, of course, the favourites regarding the Constructors, given they're 30 points clear of Ferrari with this race and the final race next week to go. So yeah, we'll get into that later on. But I hope you guys are well, no matter what time zone you're in, part of the world you're from. Hope you're all having as best a 1st of December as I am. And I hope today you'll join me in either watching along and enjoying the Qatar Grand Prix, or if you can't watch the session, but you want to know what's going on and keep up to date with what's going on, then make sure to stay right here, because I'll keep you bang up to date with everything going on in the Qatar Grand Prix. Now, a couple of things to get into. Obviously, firstly, we're going to go through the typical race build-up, looking at what happened yesterday, looking at the data from yesterday. We'll also get into the data from the sprint race, just to show you guys what the race pace is like through the field, or at least how it was in the sprint. Of course, there has been some improvements from certain teams since that sprint race, namely Red Bull. So the data is not necessarily totally reliable for what is going to happen today, but still important to have a look at. And yeah, we'll go through all of that stuff. Obviously, I'll go through my predictions for the Qatar Grand Prix. And then, like I said, later, right before the race, I'll go through some final bits, some stats, and also the championship permutations for the constructors. And then, yeah, in an hour and 55, we'll get into the race itself. And sadly, today I will be solo on the stream because unfortunately, my co-commentator, as usual, Niblo, is unable to join us for the race today because of obviously the clash of the Liverpool game. Obviously, he's a massive Liverpool fan, and Liverpool don't just have an ordinary game today. It is pretty much the game they've got against Man City later. It is basically a cup final level of game. So I don't blame him at all. Completely understandable. I was expecting him not to be on because of the importance of that game. But I would say, 90% sure he will be on next Sunday for the final race of the season in Abu Dhabi. Because timing wise, it's good for him, and I don't think it's clashing with anything at the moment, unless he lets me know, of course. As my team currently doing very well. Chelsea just gone 2 goals up. But yeah. Unfortunately, won't be joining us today, but like I said, most likely he will be on the stream next Sunday for the final race watch along of 2024. But yeah, that's sorry, that's the plan for today's stream in terms of the build up, and then obviously once we get to the race, I'll cover the race, and then we'll do a bit of a reaction afterwards. And then, well, the most of my reaction to the race will be obviously my podcast that I'll upload tomorrow regarding this Grand Prix. But I hope you guys are well. And also, a couple final things. Obviously, make sure to smash the like button. It does help the channel grow and really does help in the algorithm, of course. It helps also show that you guys really enjoy the content. So make sure to smash the like button if you haven't already. And there is a poll running, of course, in the live chat as usual, where I've asked you guys who will win the Qatar Grand Prix. Will it be Max Verstappen, George Russell, Lando Norris, or Oscar Piastri? Out of those 4, who do you think wins the race? Or do you think it'll be someone else? If you do, then put a comment in the chat if you think it'll be, say, Leclerc or Sainz or even Lewis Hamilton. Who, of course, Hamilton starting 6th, obviously made loads of progress in the race back in Vegas. We'll see what he does today. But yeah, let's get into things and start, of course, with what happened in qualifying yesterday. And yeah, it was a very close session. It was very exciting, as you can see, only half a second covering the top 7. Which is a much smaller gap, I'm pretty sure, than it was a year ago at this same Grand Prix. It just shows you how things have closed up a lot in 2024. Max Verstappen, though, just about by 0.5 of a second, took pole position, but he did not keep pole position. He later on, according to the stewards, for driving unnecessarily slowly on his outlap, when I think blocking George Russell, was given for this race a 1-place grid penalty, which I'm pretty sure is the first time we have seen a 1-place grid penalty. As far as I'm concerned, the penalty is bullshit. I mean, if you're going to give him a penalty for impeding Russell, even though Russell was not on a quick lap, then fair enough. But Russell was not on a quick lap, and even though, I mean, Max, yeah, maybe he exceeded the maximum delta time. Maybe that's why he got in trouble, but I'm pretty sure others have done the same thing and got away with it. So I don't understand why Max has been given not just a penalty, but a 1-place grid penalty. It's incredibly convenient is all I'm going to say. Because, of course, if George Russell did not get blocked, and obviously on that, lap before the last lap, Russell was not able to do a final lap in Q3 because of that time lost being blocked by Verstappen. If Russell did not lose that time and was able to get to the line before the checkered flag came, then most likely George Russell would have got pole position. So I just think it's very convenient in terms of the penalty they've given him. Very convenient. But yeah, there you go. So it will not be Verstappen on pole. George Russell, for the second race in a row, will start from pole position. And it's actually the third race in a row that Russell will be on the front row of the grid. Just shows you how great a form Russell is in right now. So yeah, Russell will be starting from pole. Max Verstappen will be starting second. And then on the second row of the grid, locking out the second row of the grid, it will be the two McLarens of Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. As I'll get onto with the sector time data, McLaren did not deliver, I think, their maximum potential in qualifying. So yeah, I think there's definitely more in the bag for McLaren, and maybe we'll see that in this race today. Charles Leclerc, fifth, not too far behind, of course, the two McLarens, only, a tenth or so behind Norris. Ferrari, I mean, will be disappointed, obviously, that Red Bull made the improvement they did in from the sprint race to qualifying. But really, in terms of pace, Ferrari couldn't have done any better, really, than where they ended up. They were not contenders for pole position. They were not as quick as Mercedes. They were not as quick as McLaren. And because of Red Bull's improvement, they weren't as quick as Red Bull either. So, yeah. Leclerc doing the best he could, I think. Yeah, maybe you could argue he could have got ahead of Piastri given how close it was, but still would have ended up slower probably than McLaren. Ferrari just didn't have pole position pace. But I think in clear air, maybe Ferrari might have the pace to win today. But again, the key there being in clear air. It's going to be hard to get clear air, obviously, with how close it is with Leclerc, behind the two McLarens, and then Russell and Max up top. If the top pack of cars, if they are as close to each other in the race today as they were in the sprint, like I said, clear air is going to be hard to find. So it's going to be interesting to see how Ferrari get on today. But like I said, I think in clear air, I think they do have the ability to win the race. It just depends on just how things shake out at the key points of obviously the start, and most importantly, I think for them, the pit stops and when they pit, where they come out, stuff like that. Lewis Hamilton sixth, another poor qualifying effort from him. 4.5 tenths slower than his teammate. It's just unacceptable from him, but still in the action. So, maybe he will be able to get in there and fight for a podium today. And if he was to get on the podium, that would be a pretty good drive from Hamilton. And then seventh, Carlos Sainz. Carlos underperforming, given that he was ahead of Leclerc other parts of the weekend. So, yeah, more in the bag, definitely, for Carlos to find, I think. So watch out for him from seventh. And then Fernando Alonso, eighth. Aston Martin, for the first time in a while, were actually impressive. And as you can see there, though, they were only 3/4 of a second off of pole position, which for them is pretty good because they've not been within a second of pole, it feels like, for quite a long time. So, yeah, that is impressive speed from Aston Martin, and especially from Fernando Alonso performing as well as he did. And obviously we'll keep an eye on what he can do today. Sergio Perez, ninth. Still poor performance by him. Really, Perez should have been mixing it, I think, with Hamilton and Sainz, towards the back end of that front pack of cars. But Perez is awfully slow, as we know. Kevin Magnussen in 10th. At least Haas got a car in the top 10. And then the rest of the field, Gasly 11th, Zhou 12th, Bottas 13th. That is, I think, Sauber, as a team, their best qualifying of the year, I'm pretty sure. So we'll see what they can do from there. I'd be very surprised if they got a point today, but stranger things have happened. So we will see. Yuki Tsunoda, 14th. Racing Bull's just nowhere near quick enough, really, to be top 10 runners. Lance Stroll, 15th. Very poor performance by him. He should have been at least on the cusp of the top 10, and he's nowhere near it. Albon 16th, Williams surprisingly quite far actually off the pace this weekend. Lawson 17th, Hulkenberg 18th, Colapinto in 19th, and then Esteban Ocon 20th. And you can see way off in terms of lap time and position compared to his teammate. And even Ocon, I saw a quote from him not too long ago on Twitter saying that he doesn't understand why he's so slow compared to Gasly. But I'm pretty sure it's due to a technical reason, whether it's the chassis or Gasly has newer parts on his car. I'm pretty sure it's something like that, because Ocon was right there with Gasly, if not ahead of Gasly, in the first half of the season. So yeah, it's baffling as to why that is really the case. But that's how qualifying ended up. Let's now go into the sector time data to understand why it ended up the way it did. So the first sector is the least important sector. It is the highest speed part of the track in terms of the amount of straights you have and absolute, flat out sections, let's say. And Red Bull half a tenth, not half a 20th, quicker than Mercedes. Not really a surprise, as you'll see with the speed trap data. Red Bull really did improve their top speed in the setup work they did between the sprint and qualifying, because they were not really that quick on the straights in the sprint, but in qualifying they were one of the best teams down the main pit straight in the main speed trap. So yeah, they've improved that quite a bit, which I think is a decently big reason why they ended up a lot better pace-wise than what we were expecting. Lando Norris third for McLaren. Not quite as good in the first sector as they were back in sprint qualifying, but not necessarily a big surprise that they, were not the quickest team in this part of the lap, because you would expect McLaren to be quicker or quickest in other parts of the lap that suit them better. But as you'll see in a moment, that was not the case. But yeah, almost a tenth and a half off Red Bull, bit excessive for them, but that's not really where McLaren fell apart in qualifying. Ferrari would have expected more, given, of course, their straight line speed is very good. Probably would have expected a tenth of a second more here in Sector 1. Aston Martin were pretty good, but as you'll see in a moment, also, that's because they have had a very good top speed in qualifying. Zhou Guanyu 6th, Sauber. It seems to me the reason Sauber have looked better in the last couple races is because their car is not as draggy as it was before. They've been better in that area in these last couple races, which is why I think they've been a bit more in the fight of things in the midfield. So yeah, Sauber looking good. Haas, surprising that they're, say 0.2 of a second behind Aston Martin in just the first sector, but as you'll see in a moment, and as we saw in Las Vegas, and I did discuss it in Vegas to a degree, Haas deliberately putting a bit more wing on their car because they know their power unit is already so powerful. They know they can get away with putting a bit extra wing on their car. And I think that is a big reason why in the sprint race they were actually as quick, if not quicker, just about, than Red Bull. Because that obviously putting more wing on the car and getting away with that obviously benefits you more so in the race when it comes especially to looking after tyres. Alpine, not so great, and then Racing Bulls and Williams, who, pretty much the two slowest teams here in Qatar, which is quite a surprise. Now, the middle sector, you've got a mix of, high speed and medium speed corners. McLaren were very good through here in sprint qualifying, but as you can see, McLaren, even though they weren't way off in terms of lap time, they were in terms of position. Only the 5th best team in the middle sector and a tenth and a half off the pace of Mercedes. This isn't necessarily all of the reason why they did not deliver in qualifying. The final sector as well was not quite good enough. But yeah, the middle sector was very disappointing, and it really set them up for what was, again, a disappointing end to qualifying. I think they've got more pace in the bag in these parts of the lap. They just didn't produce it, though, when it mattered most. But Mercedes, very impressive pace from them, half a tenth or just over half a tenth quicker than Red Bull. Haas, very strong, as you can see in the corners. Their car a lot stronger because I'm pretty sure they put a bit more wing on the car. Ferrari, not too bad. I don't think you could really expect much more from them. But yeah, McLaren, poor, very poor in the middle sector. Sauber, quite impressive. Alpine, maybe you could have expected them to be ahead of Sauber, but still decent enough. Aston Martin, bit of a drop-off. And then again, Racing Bulls and Williams, the two slowest teams. And then in the final sector, which is all high-speed corners, Mercedes and Red Bull on the same pace. McLaren, pretty much on the same pace as well, but just a tiny bit slower. But again, you would have expected McLaren to probably be right there, say quickest, even if it was just about ahead of Mercedes and Red Bull. So the middle sector mostly is why they were, so off the pace compared to what we thought they would be. But also, again, the final sector also adding a slight contribution to that as well. Ferrari doing, I think, as well as you could expect in the final sector. And then Aston Martin, pretty good through that final sector, which is a big reason Alonso ended up 8th on the grid and on the 4th row of the grid. Gasly, pretty good at the Alpine. Haas, not great, but good enough. Racing Bulls a bit better. Sauber, quite a big drop-off in the final sector, which is a bit surprising, given how good they were in the middle sector. And then, yeah, Williams, again, the slowest team. Williams, as we'll see in a moment, I think really just got the setup wrong this weekend. I think that's the issue. I don't think it's a car, fundamental car issue necessarily. But looking, if I go back to the top 10 from qualifying, looking at, what the pecking order was, I would say I think Mercedes were quicker than Red Bull in qualifying. Again, if Russell was able to do that final lap, I think Russell would have gone quicker and would have took pole. So yeah, I'd say Mercedes quicker than Red Bull, and then Red Bull you would have to say second, McLaren third, Ferrari fourth. I will say though with McLaren that even though I think they were in the end slower than Red Bull, I don't think it's by 2 or 3 tenths of a second. I think the gap is very close between those two teams. So yeah, we're talking again very close margins between those two. And then Ferrari, were clearly the weakest of the top 4 teams. And then Aston Martin, you would probably say overall the best midfield team ahead of Haas, and then after that probably Alpine in 7th, and then 8th probably Sauber, and then Racing Bulls and Williams, the 2 slowest teams. But maybe the speed traps will indicate with certain teams why maybe certain teams are a bit quicker than expected and why certain teams are a bit slower than expected. Because of course you've got that very long pit straight, which is very important that you have enough speed through there so you don't get absolutely mugged off in the race, and obviously it does help to a degree in qualifying. Let's just go through that to see how teams are performing. And this speed trap data, by the way, is from the speed trap located at the end of the pit straight. And as you can see, Aston Martin with Fernando Alonso had the best top speed, and that is why, really, they were so good in the first sector, and really why, at high speed, they were so good. And that's why they are 8th on the grid, because they really got the setup just right for, obviously, their car around this track. So congratulations to Aston Martin for that, getting things right for once. Red Bull, though, you can see, improved a lot with their top speed, so watch out for them. Obviously, Max second on the grid. If he remains that way after the first lap and is within a second of George Russell or Norris or whoever's in the lead, then yeah, watch out for Max Verstappen, because that Red Bull is very quick down the straights. Mercedes also, and we did see that to a degree in the sprint race with Russell harrying Oscar Piastri. Haas still pretty quick down the straights, even though I'm still pretty sure they have added a tad more wing to their car. Alpine still pretty good. Ferrari, I think, also have probably added a tad more wing, probably just to protect the tyres. Racing Bulls, not great. Sauber, not great. And then McLaren, you can see 4 kilometers an hour slower than Mercedes and 5 kilometers an hour slower than Red Bull. Now, if a Red Bull or a Mercedes or even a Ferrari, because Ferrari are 3 kilometers an hour quicker, obviously if they're behind the McLaren with DRS, which is it a 10 kilometer an hour advantage? That is a lot of extra top speed that those teams will have compared to McLaren. So I think with McLaren, in terms of yesterday, them not quite maybe delivering, maybe it is down to the setup. Maybe just put a bit too much wing on their car. We know the McLaren, usually is one of the slowest cars in the speed trap, but maybe it was worth, making the car a bit more slippery in a straight line, because maybe would have, been better for their qualifying effort, but also for the race, given how close things are going to be. If they've, like I said, if they've got a Ferrari or a Mercedes behind them, which they do actually have on the grid, if those cars get within a second of the McLaren and the McLaren is not able to have DRS, McLaren are going to be a sitting duck down the pit straight. So I do fear for McLaren to an extent. And I think the key for McLaren is really they need to be in dirty air more so than anyone today, purely so they can have that DRS advantage from the other car, the car ahead, so that they can protect themselves. I mean, we saw that in the sprint race where Lando had to back off to help Oscar stay inside his DRS window to make sure Oscar stayed in second place. So, yeah, that is a concern for McLaren. And then Williams, no idea why they are that slow in the speed trap. My guess is that they have just got the setup totally wrong and have put way too much downforce on the car, or not downforce on, but way too much wing on the car, and it just hasn't worked in terms of efficiency, especially at high speed, because you can see 7 kilometers an hour slower Williams are than Aston Martin. That is a massive amount to be losing to another team that you're supposed to be fighting, really, through the field. So, yeah. Don't expect Williams to be necessarily doing a lot of overtaking today. But yeah, if anyone gets within a second of them, then Williams are a sitting duck. Because, yeah, I think setup-wise, I think they've just got it wrong. And I think that's really why they, if you look at the sprint qualifying, Albon was up in 12th, a lot better than where he was in the proper qualifying. And clearly, yeah, I think they've just got the setup wrong there. And that's why, they are where they are. Which is, 16th and 19th on the grid, I believe. So, yeah, Williams really getting it wrong there, which is a shame for them. But those are the top speeds. So watch out, obviously, for Aston Martin, Red Bull, Mercedes, Haas, Alpine, and Ferrari, I would say, who all have a good top speed. And we'll see what they're like down the pit straight. Obviously, there's only one DRS zone at this Lusail circuit, and it is down the pit straight. But let's go on to the race pace and the average lap times from the sprint race from all the teams. Now, couple things to address. So McLaren did have the best race pace in the sprint, but of course Lando Norris was for quite a while deliberately backing up to help Oscar Piastri, which is why the lap time difference you can see there between McLaren, Mercedes, and Ferrari was literally hundredths of a second and a quarter of a tenth even between those top three. Because again, Lando kept backing off at certain points to help his teammate. Also, I did not include in my calculations Lando's final lap in the sprint because, of course, in the final corner, he slowed right down and let Oscar through to win. But McLaren, without having to back up and, help others, McLaren had clearly the best pace in that sprint. If you go watch the first few laps, Lando, was pulling away and McLaren looked really, I'd say probably a couple tenths of a second quicker than Mercedes and Ferrari. Mercedes and Ferrari, though, seem to me to have very similar pace. So, yeah, not really much to decide between those two. Red Bull, as you can see there, they were only the fifth best team in the sprint, only slightly slower per lap than Haas. Red Bull, of course, though, improved quite a bit with their setup from the sprint to qualifying. So I think Red Bull will probably be right in the mix with McLaren, Mercedes, and Ferrari in race pace terms, but I don't think they will have the best race pace. It will be really just dependent on tyre wear, obviously how hard the driver is pushing, and just how well Max Verstappen does in general during the race. But I'm not expecting Red Bull to have the best race pace. Most likely that should be McLaren, especially with how McLaren, towards the second half of a tyre stint, McLaren get even quicker compared to their rivals because they just manage their tyres so well. So yeah, McLaren, I'm expecting to have the best race pace, but of course that's in clear air. There might not be a lot of clear air for them in this Grand Prix. But Haas, their race pace is good, so as long as they can stay clean in the race, then they should be able to deliver on that. And of course, watch out for Nico Hülkenberg coming back from 18th on the grid. I'm sure he is going to make a lot of progress and might even still finish in the points, given how quick that car is. Alpine, decent pace. Aston Martin, not that great. But of course, they also made improvements from the sprint to qualifying. So I think Aston Martin will have enough pace to finish in the points. But Alonso, his main rival today is Kevin Magnussen because of how quick the Haas car is. Sauber, their pace, not too bad in the mix, but not really good enough to be top 10 runners. And then Williams and Racing Bulls, quite clearly slower than the rest. But yeah, McLaren, if I was to bet on anyone having the best race pace today in clear air, then I'd bet on McLaren. I still think when they deliver to their potential, I still think that car is the best in race pace terms around this Lusail circuit. So after all of that and all of that data, let's now get on to my final predictions, of course, for this Qatar Grand Prix. And it is to a degree based on what we saw in the sprint, but also based on really what we've seen this last few races from the teams and just how quick they tend to be in general over the course of a race distance. So my race prediction is that George Russell will hang on by a couple seconds to win the Qatar Grand Prix and take what would be his third win of the season. And if he does win this weekend, it would be thoroughly deserved because he has been right on it from the word go and he's been absolutely fantastic. Max Verstappen, I think, will be just behind in second. I don't think Red Bull will quite have enough pace to beat Russell, and plus Russell, like I said, in very good form. And Max will finish just ahead of Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc, who I think will be third and fourth. McLaren and Ferrari, I think, will probably overall have better race pace than Red Bull, but it will be not by much. We're talking maybe a 10th here, a 10th there during the course of the Grand Prix. But towards the end, I think it will be very close between Max, Lando, and Leclerc for the final couple podium positions. Oscar Piastri, P5, he should be the weaker of the two McLarens. He really was helped out a lot in the sprint with Lando giving him DRS. If it wasn't for that, Oscar probably would have fell back maybe a couple positions. His pace was not exactly stellar on his own. Carlos Sainz, I think, will be just behind him then in 6th, with Lewis Hamilton in 7th. And then Sergio Perez quite far behind in 8th, with Alonso 9th, and Kevin Magnussen, I think, will get the final point in P10. So that's my prediction for the 2024 Qatar Grand Prix. Let me know in the chat, guys, what your predictions are. Make sure to keep voting in that poll if you haven't already. And I'll get to, obviously, those results right before lights out. But we've still got just over, or just under, rather, an hour and a half until the race begins in Qatar. So, yeah, make sure to, like I said, get your comments in the chat, because I will read through your comments in a moment. And again, if you haven't already, smash that like button. I can see we're on 13 likes. Let's try and get up to 20 or 25 likes if we can in the next half an hour or so. That'd be great if we could do that. But of course, as well, make sure, if you are new to the channel, to subscribe for more content like this, because of course next year we'll be doing plenty of qualifying and race watch-alongs to cover what could be a classic 2025 Formula 1 season. Let me just get the countdown back on screen for you guys, as we have got an hour and 23 minutes to go until the race begins. So, yeah, make sure to get your comments in the chat. One thing I want to get onto, though, before I come to your comments, is race strategy. So, let me just go to the Pirelli page and see what they're saying. And, well, nothing so far. But, well, if they're not saying anything about what the strategy is going to be, then I'll have to, we'll have to guess, pretty much. But if you look at yesterday, those medium compound tyres that everyone was using, except Zhou Guanyu, of course, yeah, those medium tyres that they were using in the sprint held on pretty well. And I do think that a one-stop race is possible in this Grand Prix. The tyre compounds, by the way, are the 3 hardest compounds that Pirelli normally bring. The soft compound tyres, the C3, and then the C2 and the C1. So the C1 tyre, for example, is a very hard compound tyre, if you know what I mean. It's incredibly durable. And like I said, the C2, the medium, was quite durable in that sprint. If you go and look at the lap times, they were actually getting quicker right at the end of the sprint, and it was a 19-lap sprint race. So I think a one-stop race is probably what we are going to see in this Grand Prix. Maybe certain cars will go for a two-stop. Depends really what you're aiming for in the race. Obviously, you know, a well-timed safety car or virtual safety car could force people's hands in terms of going for a two-stop. But if you've got nothing to lose, then I think a two-stop is definitely a good thing to go with. Because fresh tyres around this circuit is very strong. Absolutely. We have seen that before. Even though certain teams have had, you know, certain tyre warm-up issues, that only tends to last, say, a lap until, you know, they get their tyres in the right operating window. So, yeah, the undercut should be pretty strong once they get those tyres fired up. Of course, it gets later and later into the evening as the race goes on, so the track temperature will continue to fall, which of course does help the drivers trying to do a one-stop strategy. But yeah, I think we could see we could see maybe a few people trying a two-stop strategy, but again, it depends really what you're going for. Um, for example, maybe Williams, because they're right at the back and they're so slow, maybe they'll decide to split their strategy and just go for something um and see what happens. I mean, that technically that's what Zhou Guan Yu did in the sprint, and he was forced to pit after starting on the soft compound tire because after what was it, like 5 laps, he was lapping 4 seconds a lap slower than the race leader, which is that's like HRT pace from what we used to see from them back when they were a Formula One team, which was like what 12, 13 years ago. So soft compound tire probably will not be seen at all today unless we get a very late safety car. Then maybe for 2 or 3 laps, someone will take the gamble and go for it. But yeah, most people, at least most people, should go for a one-stop strategy, and it will be most likely starting on the medium and then pitting probably between, say, lap 22 and 27, and then going on to a set of hard tires and then finishing the race on those tires. But if you start on the hard compound tires, because of how durable they are, even though they won't be very quick probably for the first few laps, because of how durable they are, you could go a really long way into this race on those hard compound tires. I reckon at least 35 laps, I think you could do on those hard tires, given how hard that compound is, compared to the others in the Pirelli range. So yeah, we might see. I think actually we probably will see from a few drivers, you know, uh, starting on the hard tire, going super long into the race, hoping for a safety car. And then if a safety car does come out or a virtual safety car, then they can come in and, get some fresh mediums on. But really, with the medium compound tire, if you start on the hard tire, you want to be moving on to the medium at the earliest. I would say lap 32 is probably the earliest you want to be going from hard to medium. But I can see drivers going even longer than that, to be honest. And I mean, we'll see with Mercedes because they do tend to split strategy quite often, and I'd say most of the time with Mercedes it doesn't actually work. But I mean, maybe they'll try it here. But maybe Lewis Hamilton will end up starting on the hard compound tires because obviously he's, in terms of how quick the car is, he's out of position back in 6th place when really he should be in the top 3 at least. Maybe Mercedes will start him on the hard tyre to have that much better durability. And then we'll see how his race develops from there. And maybe he'll be able to get a podium late on by having fresher and softer tyres. I think, honestly, if I was Red Bull, I think with Sergio Perez, I would probably just start him on the hard tyre because, I mean, what is there to lose? They're obviously, they're not going to win the Constructors' Championship, but maybe it will help Perez more towards the second half of the race if he is on fresher and softer tyres to maybe, I don't know, fight Hamilton or Sainz if, he's not losing too much time per lap, but he will probably lose too much time per lap for that to happen. But yeah, it's going to be, I think, most interesting it'll be to see who starts on what compound. Like I said, most people should start on the medium, but we might get a couple surprises in there. And like I said, watch out for Mercedes because they do tend to split strategy quite often. So I wouldn't be surprised if Hamilton starts on the hard compound tyre. And maybe, like I said, that will give him the chance later on in the race to take a podium, which is up for grabs, no doubt about it. That Mercedes is easily quick enough to be on the podium, with both cars. It's just down to Lewis Hamilton to, provide the goods at the end of the day. But I think now we've got a bit of time to until obviously we get into the Grand Prix. Let's come to your comments in the chat. And we'll go to the start. Make sure to keep these comments coming, by the way. I'll probably read your comments for the next, say, I don't know, 40, maybe 45 minutes. And then we'll go on to a couple other things before the start of the Grand Prix. Still got another hour and 15, of course, until lights out. But hello to you all. I hope you're all doing well. The Woden says the penalty is a joke. Drivers can now speed up on a warm-up lap and get drivers in front of penalty. Yeah, I think it's bullshit. But yeah, at least it's not going to affect this championship. That would be extra bullshit if it if it was going to affect this championship, because it'd be quite unfair, honestly. Hello, by the way, to Astro. Who says good day, Chazza, and everyone else. Vizen says, I don't understand why I pay F1 TV. They're not even showing the pre-race warm-up only on YouTube. What a joke. Well, I'm not sure where you're at, but I know in the UK, obviously, even if you have F1 TV, they don't show the live sessions live, obviously, because obviously we have Sky Sports F1 here, who exclusively show every session. So yeah, it might be something like that, depending on where you're at. Astra saying, yeah, we know Ocon and Gasly are much closer together performance-wise usually, and so not reflecting on the drivers, at least not that much. Will F1 saying Max's penalty is BS. Astra saying, well, Max has had a wee bit of unfair help from the FIA before. Cough 2021 cough. Let's see if I can find some other ones here. I think Ange10 says Russell 100% the win. Will F1 saying F1 does it every qualifying session, so shall we give F1 a grid penalty every race then? That's what I mean. We see this. It's not like we don't see this often. We see this in a lot of qualifying sessions, and people get away with it. But suddenly Max is given a one-place grid penalty, which again I just think is incredibly convenient, given how things probably would have ended up if Russell had made the line in time to start his final lap. I just find it very convenient. And Will F1 saying Leclerc will retire Hamilton. Yanni saying, why wasn't Perez's name in the poll? Ange 10 saying, damn, I'm Tom with watching the Grand Prix in Liverpool Man City. I know. It is so shit, the timing of this race compared to obviously that, because I really want to watch that as well. But obviously, there's a Grand Prix on it. It's just, yeah, it's really bad timing. And in the UK, I can tell you now, this Grand Prix is not going to do well in terms of live viewers, because obviously on the other Sky Sports channel, you've got, a gigantic football match, which is going to get way more viewers. So, yeah. But we'll see what happens, and hopefully it's not an awful, boring race. Because if it is, that'll be very angering, especially if the Liverpool Man City game ends up being a classic or a memorable game in some way. Rook says Formula One website has the Pirelli Strat Chaz. And Rook's actually just posted it. Most likely one stop is the medium to hard strat with the optimum pit window coming between lap 19 and 25, which is a bit earlier than I was saying, but it's about the same. But this approach is not without risk. It could be marginal for some in terms of wear. So yeah, as I was saying, maybe we might get a few going for a two stop, depending on where or whether there's anything to lose for them in the race. And we'll have to see just how that goes. But it should be, for most people, a one-stop race. Let's scroll down, find out what you guys are saying. And Sarah Gar saying, I would say Lando in like the 70s or 80s. I'm not quite sure what he's necessarily saying, but sounds interesting. But I think there's a bit of a debate on, by the looks of, in the chat, bit of a debate between some of you about comparing drivers in different eras. Obviously, I'm not going to get too much into comparing certain drivers from certain eras, but I know that certain people say, "Oh, you can't compare because you know the eras are too different." One argument I've heard, which to me is just like a cowardly way of not contributing to the discussion of, say, the greatest of all time, is the argument of, well, all the eras in Formula One are too different, so you can't actually say who the greatest of all time is. We can only say who the greatest of each era is. I'm sorry, but that is complete bullshit. That is complete bullshit. The fundamentals of driving a racing car quick, as I have said before, has remained the same since the beginning of time. Or the beginning, not of time, but, of motor racing. Yes, the cars have changed, safety's changed, technology's changed. I get that. But the fundamentals in terms of throttle application, car control, late braking, controlling the car in wet or slippery conditions, those are the fundamentals of being a racing driver. And those have not changed since the beginning of Formula One. Therefore, when you compare drivers from different eras, yes, you can do it, because especially with, if you look at, say, the top 10 or so, all of those great drivers from the different eras were all great to an extent at those particular things. And not all drivers in history, but I think definitely the top few all-time greats would be great in any era, and that's why I call them an all-time great. For example, Lewis Hamilton. If we're looking at prime Lewis Hamilton, which of course is not now, prime Lewis Hamilton would be 20, what, 17, 18, 19, 2020, something like that. 2021 to a degree. If you put that Lewis Hamilton in any other era of Formula One, he would still be an all-time great driver. It doesn't matter what cars it would be. Even if the 1950s cars, it doesn't matter. He would still be an all-time great driver. Same with Senna, Schumacher, Fangio, Clark, Prost, Verstappen, Lauda. Do you know what I mean? Those drivers on that all-time level, I think would be great in any era. But again, not all drivers that have won championships would be great in any era. Any era, sorry. For example, I don't think Sebastian Vettel necessarily would be great in any era, which is why I struggle to call him an all-time great driver. Because I'm not sure if you put him in the late 80s, early 90s, I'm not sure he would be as great as he was when he obviously was at his best in the early 2010s. Because I don't think Vettel with Sebastian, he he what he did obviously was great, but he did thrive driving particular type of cars, if you know what I mean. Cars that were at the rear end, very stable, and cars that were really, you know, um, in that way that he had at Red Bull, where again the rear end of the car was stable and generally the car was very stable, to where he was able to drive in that very fast but smooth way that he does. I'm not sure that works in the 80s where you have to, wrestle the car a lot more to get the pace out of it, or say the 90s with where the same. But I think in other ways he would do well in those eras in terms of his smoothness would help obviously with managing tires, managing the car, which obviously is something that Alain Prost back then was revered for. So I'm not saying Vettel would be trash in that era, but I just don't think he would be on the same level as he was in the V8 era, or even when he was at his best in the V6 era, because I think again he really, when you gave him cars that were less stable, and I'm not just talking about the 2020 Ferrari, I'm talking about other cars he's had which were less stable where he didn't quite thrive. He just wasn't the same. So yeah, I think, like I said, Vettel, I don't think I would quite say he was a all-time great. And to be honest, with Fernando Alonso, maybe with him, I think you could make an argument that Alonso, whilst he's a great driver, had a great career, many great moments, maybe you could argue Alonso is not an all-time great. But it'd be a very interesting argument to have. But yeah, like I said, you can compare drivers from different eras because again, the fundamentals of driving a car quickly has always been the same. The only thing that has changed is the technology of the cars and just the way the cars are. But the cars, fundamentally, you steer left, they steer left. You steer right, they steer right. You press your foot down on throttle with it, and it goes. Those things are still the same as it used to be back in 1950. So, yeah, point made, I think. Patrick Thomas says another 1-2 for Mercedes. I would be very surprised if that happened. Very surprised, but it's not impossible. But I think it's definitely harder for um, for Hamilton to come through the pack here than it would be in Vegas, because obviously in Vegas you have a very long back straight. Let me find some other comments here. Astra saying, don't know if it affected Max's title. It might be considered justice and squaring the ledger given a certain previous title fight. Um, yeah, if you want to argue that, then then go for it. Astra, how do you rate? Asks, how do you rate Liam Lawson so far, Chazza, relative to Yuki and expectations this weekend and in general so far? Since he's come back, I think he's done well. That drive, obviously in Austin, was amazing. Coming from the back almost to finish in what was it, ninth, I think it was, and then the drive in Brazil in those conditions. Very impressed with that, and also not just the drive, but his defending against Piastri, Hamilton as well, and Perez, I think it was as well. Yeah, very impressed, but not necessarily consistent as Lawson. But I think I said this yesterday. We can give him slack or cut him slack for that because he's only just come back into the car. But yeah, I think he's done well. I think he's done well. Coming back into things. But keen to see what he does next season. Whether he's in the Red Bull or the Racing Bulls car, he'll definitely be on the grid though, which is good to see. Because I mean, in hindsight, he probably should have been in the car to start the season. As for saying, it's so nice to see Max actually having to fight in a fight a little these days. Pity the season didn't start off that way, and pity Max uh Perez. I was trying to understand what the hell you were saying there, but yeah, Perez you were saying instead of Perez, as someone else dubbed him as Mr. Easy Beat alongside him. Yeah, I mean, 2024's been great, but I mean, yeah, with the way it started, obviously with Red Bull dominating, it did give Max, yeah, it gave him an advantage to start with, but people have to remember that after Lando won in Miami, the gap was it 52 points it was after that Miami Grand Prix between Max and Lando, and now look at the gap. It's what is it, like 60 or 70 points, something like that. So even if McLaren had started the year right there with Red Bull, I still think Max would have won the championship because Max is clearly a much better driver than Lando Norris. Um, or Sarah Gar saying all time Norris is like 70s or 80s. Williford said Lando Norris has been one of the flops of the season. People may say that's harsh, but I don't think it is. I think you're right. I think, it was one of the things we were looking forward to seeing with Lando because we knew he was very quick, very talented, but we were always curious, if he had a similar car to Max, how good is he really? And we found out that he is never going to beat Max in a fair fight. It's never going to happen because Max is way, way too good. And the problem with Lando is, I think the easiest way to describe it is he's an elite driver in qualifying, but in the race, he is like Nico Hulkenberg. And even that is probably disrespectful to Hulkenberg, given the amount of mistakes that Lando has made in 2024. But I think you catch my drift. He's an elite driver in qualifying, but when it comes to the race, he is midfield at best. When with Max, he is elite no matter what session. Same with Leclerc, same with Russell, same with Alonso, same with Hamilton up until this season. I mean, Hamilton's only been, I'd say, midfield level probably in qualifying, and some races. And yeah, that's the difference between Lando and Max. Lando in the race is a midfield caliber driver in terms of how he performs. That is just reality. And really, with Lando, I think his elite level speed in qualifying bails him out a lot of the time from being made to look worse than he looks in general. You know, I wouldn't say he's quite the same as Jarno Trulli, who, you know, was a god in qualifying, but in the race was hopeless in terms of pace. But at least with Trulli, he wasn't really, you know, Trulli didn't really make mistakes in the race. He just had no pace. That was the whole criticism with Jarno, was he was just so awfully slow and would drive nowhere near to what he did in qualifying, where again in qualifying he was probably, you'd have to say, still to this day, Jarno Trulli is probably still one of the fastest drivers over a single lap we've ever seen. But again, in the races, he was nowhere to be found. Astra says Max will get my respect when he's faced real challenges, really bad on mid cars and equivalent title capable contenders alongside him in equal machines. Well, I'm hoping he's gained a bit more of your respect this year, because there's no way anybody can sit there and say, oh, well, Max won the championship because he had the best car. No way. I know Karun Chandok was trying to say that in the Sky F1 podcast a couple of weeks ago, which is absolute bullshit, where Karun was like, oh, Max, the reason he won was because he got that early lead in the first 5 races. Again, wrong. Max has a bigger lead now than he did after Miami. So, yeah, literally incorrect. So yeah, like I said, Max, the reason he's won the championship this year is because he is the best driver on the planet. End of story. But obviously next year, you would think, sorry, by the way, if you can hear a plane in the background, just going ahead. Yeah, with Verstappen, obviously next year, most likely Red Bull are not going to have the best car on the grid. It'll be probably competitive, but not the quickest. If Max wins the championship next year, fighting against, you know, Leclerc and Norris, let's say, and maybe Russell, then I think at that point, pretty much everyone has to be surely putting Max in their top 5 all-time lists, because the quality of drivers he's racing against is, you know, some of the best we've seen in Formula One history in terms of the quality of the grid at the top end. So yeah. Let's have a look at some other comments here. saying Norris over Trulli. Will F1 saying Trulli over Norris. Astra saying he did start the year with a rocket ship that was far ahead of everyone else. That first unmemorable half of the season, Australia aside. Yeah, he did, but again, overall, that wasn't why he won the championship, because Lando did actually, you know, close that gap down earlier in the season, much earlier in the season, when Red Bull were better off, compared to now, where McLaren are even stronger compared to Red Bull in terms of pure pace. Um, let's find some other comments here if I can. Astro asking, how do you rate drivers like Gilles Villeneuve, Didier Pironi, Jean Berra, and Ronnie Peterson? With Jean Berra, I don't know enough about the guy, so can't say. Ronnie Peterson, very good driver, very very fast. If you go look at you know um, a lot of his qualifying efforts, he was one of those drivers who was just super super quick in qualifying. Kind of like a 1970s version of Valtteri Bottas, but I think just obviously a bit better Ronnie was than Bottas. But yeah, he was very, very quick over a single lap, was Ronnie. Um, Obviously sad what happened to him, but ultimately I don't think Ronnie was an elite level driver in terms of I don't think he had the full package. I think really what his qualities were based around was just being very, very fast. But I don't think he had much else necessarily to him than that. Um, but yeah, he was a very, very quick driver. But yeah, like I said, the way he passed was just very sad, especially given that I think he still had a chance of winning the championship that year in the Lotus in what was it, 78. Didier Pironi, again, I don't really know a ton about Pironi's career. Obviously, I know about the infamous year of 1981, where the whole thing with him and was it Gilles Villeneuve. But yeah, again, I don't really know enough about his F1 career to know whether was he like this really great driver. He was fast. He was a good driver, but yeah, it's hard to know with him. But with Gilles Villeneuve, talent wise, I think during that era that he was on the grid from say 77 to when he passed away in 1981, I think Gilles Villeneuve was the most talented driver in Formula One. Not necessarily the quickest, because he was a bit, he wasn't always consistent, could be erratic at times. But talent wise, I'd say, yeah, he was probably the most talented in Formula One during that, 77 to 81 period. Saying that, we do have to remember that that period in Formula One was probably one of the weakest in terms of having elite level drivers. We had a lot of good drivers in that era, Jody Scheckter, Alan Jones, Carlos Reutemann, Keke Rosberg, Nelson Piquet. Yeah, very good drivers, but not, like Senna, Schumacher, Hamilton, Lauda levels. I mean, Lauda was also racing in that time, but it wasn't the same Nicky Lauda, really. Um, between those years or in those certain years where he was racing. I mean, I know he won the championship in 1977, but again, Nicky was not as good as he was before his Nürburgring accident. So I think we have to remember that with Gilles, that even though yes, he was very good, he I think stood out in an era where there wasn't really too many top drivers in Formula One. Again, there was quite a few good drivers, but not absolute top elite, you know, uh, drivers like again Hamilton, Senna, Schumacher type drivers. Astro asking, have you ever read the book Grand Prix Greats by Nigel Roebuck? Great look at his 25 greatest drivers. Highly recommend. No, I haven't read that book, but maybe one day I'll pick it up. Um, and Astro has put in the chat his top five, which for him is Senna, Fangio, Hamilton, Prost, Lauda. Then he says maybe Ascari, Clark, Brabham, and then it says Schumacher. Almost forgot. Um, I remember on the channel I did my top 10, and it's not really that much different to what it is now. But I would say my top 10, I'd go Vettel 10th, Alonso 9th, 8th. I would go. Actually, no, revise that. Vettel, I would have outside of my top 10, and I'd have Alonso 10th, Jackie Stewart in ninth, and then 8th, I would have. I think 8th, I'd probably have Alain Prost. And then 7th, I would go, for the moment, Max Verstappen. I think 7th is as high as I can really put him. 6th, I'd go Jim Clark. 5th, Niki Lauda. 4th, what do you call it? 4th, Fangio. 3rd, Michael Schumacher. 2nd, Ayrton Senna. And 1st, still the GOAT for me, is Lewis Hamilton. And that isn't going to change unless, of course, Max Verstappen can do something about it. Because he's the only one I can see right now who could maybe replace Hamilton in my list as the GOAT. But still going to take a few years probably for that to happen. How would you rate Bruce McLaren? Again, I don't know enough about his career really. To to really judge, I would say. And then what do you call it? As Todd says, thoughts on the 6-wheel cars. A wild idea, but yeah. Not sure it had necessarily all the benefits that I think was it Tyrrell were hoping for. But obviously we had the fan car, didn't we, back then? Which was just an absurd sight when you go back and look at that Brabham fan car, which I think Niki Lauda won in I can't remember what race it was. It was a European race in 77 or 78, I think it was. But yeah, so that's my top 10, and then from 11 to 20, I'm not going to say what order, but it'll be drivers like Vettel, Hakkinen, Raikkonen, PK, Mansell, who else? Probably Sterling Moss, I'd probably throw in there. Graham Hill, drivers like that. Say the second tier drivers, not quite all-time greats, but still greats in their own time, let's say. Yeah, those are the type of drivers that I'd probably put in that area. But I do think probably one day I should probably do like a long video where I go through my top 20 and give my reasons, because again I remember I did my top 10, but again it was years ago, and I don't remember if it was even uploaded on this channel. I think I might have done it on the old channel, which obviously is no longer around anymore. So yeah, probably maybe even this winter. Who knows? Maybe I'll do that. A top 20. My top 20 drivers of all time as of 2025, and we'll see how it goes. Yeah, 1978 Swedish. I thought it was something like that, the Swedish or Dutch Grand Prix or something like that. Um, yeah, Serigaro, who's been around for a while, he says no, it's on your last channel, the all-time list. That is, yeah. I thought it was. It was probably. I think I did it in 2017. I think it was late 2017 or something like that. I did my top 10. And I think I split the top 10 into two separate videos, if I believe. But yeah, like I said, eventually, probably maybe that's something I can upload over the winter. Is yeah, a top 20 all time as of January 2025 or February 2025, and then you guys can have your say whether you agree, disagree, or whatever. Fittipaldi, Emerson, Fittipaldi, yeah, I think he'd probably go in the maybe the 11 to 20 range. Will F1 saying Hamilton hasn't been overall great when he hasn't had a championship winning car, along with the fact he's never won more than 5 races in a row. The whole races in a row thing, I honestly I think is irrelevant. Because it doesn't, you know, I don't think it is a true mark of who is better than who, as far as I'm concerned. Um, but no, I disagree. I think Hamilton has been great in cars that have not won championships. You can go look at seasons like 2010, where even though towards the end of that year he made a couple mistakes overall for that season, I'd say he was one of the best, maybe arguably the best over the course of the season, given how slow the McLaren was compared to the Red Bull. And then yeah, 2012. Yeah, it wasn't his best season, but he still performed at a great level. And even I know the last couple years have not been prime Lewis Hamilton, but even 2022 and 2023, I still think Lewis Hamilton performed at a great level. It was just the car was so bad, he wasn't able to, to get a load of race wins. But if that Mercedes last year, for example, was as quick as it is now, then last season Lewis would have won probably a few races, no doubt. So yeah, I disagree with that. But like I said, for me, Lewis is the GOAT. Um, let's see if I can find some other comments. Will F1 saying Jim Clark could have won 5 titles had he not been killed. That's one thing as well, which I learned after I did that all-time list, that if I do that video going through my top 20, that's one thing I have learned not to, like a trap not to fall into, is obviously with some of the drivers in the top 20 all-time list, some of them obviously died during their prime. Clark, Senna being, two, of the most obvious examples. I don't want to fall into the trap of what they could have won, because at the end of the day, we're judging the drivers on what they have done. But yeah, with Jim Clark, yeah, I think Clark would have won. I mean, it depends really when Clark would have stepped away. If Clark would have stepped away, let's say 1973 would be Jim's final season if he had lived, then Clark probably would have won the title in 68, 70, 72, and maybe 73. That would have been what? At least 5 championships, maybe 6. And if Jim had lived and had done that, you could then say Jim Clark is, or would have been, one of the top 2 or 3 greatest ever Formula One drivers. But again, because he died when he did, we have to base it on what he had accomplished rather than what he would have accomplished. Because again, you could easily fall into that trap with Senna. Because Senna would have won more championships than he did. I think we all know that. But we don't know how many more. Could have been 2, 3, 4, could have been 6 more. Who knows? But again, we can't fall into that trap because you have to judge it based on what they did do, again, rather than what they could have done if they had, lived a bit longer. So, yeah. And I'd say probably with that list that um that I did a few years ago, that was probably the biggest mistake I made, was falling into that trap. LNF1, do you think McLaren will clinch the title this weekend? No. I think it'll be next weekend. I will get into the championship permutations for this race. McLaren can win the Constructors' Championship in this Grand Prix. But like I said, I will get into what the permutations are and how McLaren can do that. But if McLaren don't win the race, then most likely, very, very likely, McLaren are going to have to wait until next week in Abu Dhabi to wrap up the championship, because they need to outscore Ferrari today by 15 points, and they need to make sure that Red Bull don't outscore them by, I think, is it 23 points? Now, that is doable, outscoring Ferrari by 15 points, but if you look where the two teams are on the grid, McLaren are 3rd and 4th. If they finish there, that's 27 points. And then Ferrari, if they finish where they are, that's 16 points. That's only a gain of 11 points. So they would be close to winning it, but, not quite enough. So if Ferrari finish with both cars, and they do finish with both cars in the top 6, say Ferrari, then McLaren will have to probably win the race today to have a good chance at winning the championship. But, if Ferrari have a DNF, that really opens the door up, even if Leclerc has a decent race. But, yeah, we'll see what happens. But I think, most likely McLaren are going to win it in Abu Dhabi. It's going to take, Ferrari have still got obviously a decent chance at the championship, but it's really going to have to take quite a special turnaround for Ferrari to win their first championship. It would be in 16 years. Senna versus Schumacher battles would have been epic, says Todd. Absolutely. And I think that's really why Formula One had a bit of a dip, rather, in popularity, into the late 90s a bit, because, once the era of Senna, Prost, Mansell had come to an end, it was then going to be the era of Senna versus Schumacher, which would have gone on for years. But then once Senna passed away, Michael, had some interesting championship battles with, Damon Hill, Jacques Villeneuve, Hakkinen, but none of those drivers really were on his level. Hakkinen, to a degree, you could say, was, in terms of pure speed, but overall, as a driver, Michael was clearly the best driver during those times, because again, he didn't have a Senna, for example, around to properly fight him on that elite level. Paul C said there is no possible way to classify drivers because circuits, technology, drivers, and teams are all from a different era. To say Clark is better than Hill is bonkers, or Fangio better than any. Again, I completely disagree with that because the fundamentals of of what a racing driver does when it comes to car control, throttle control and application, late braking, all of that. The fundamentals have always been the same, regardless of the types of circuits, the technology. Again, that has always remained the same. So yes, we can absolutely say that Clark was better than Hill, and I'm telling you now, if you're talking about Damon Hill, I'm assuming Jim Clark was levels above Damon Hill. Not even close. Not even close. If they were in the same team at their peak, Clark would destroy Damon Hill. Absolutely destroy him. As on Sky F1, they're just showing a replay of the start of the sprint yesterday. But we've got just under half an hour to go, guys, until the beginning of this all-important Qatar Grand Prix, where, like I said, the constructors very much up for contention. But let me just post this link out quickly for the stream. One final time, come join us here to watch along this crucial race in Qatar. And there you go. But yeah, we've got 28 minutes to go. So not long at all. Time has flown by. Astro saying if Schumacher hadn't been so dominant, Mika would have won a lot more, and Mika would have had, and Mika had that huge life-threatening crash in Adelaide too. Yeah, Hakkinen would have had a much easier time if Michael wasn't around, obviously. Even though we had that Hakkinen and Irvine championship battle in '99, which I mean the only reason really that we had that battle was because the McLaren was allergic at times that year to finishing races. The amount of reliability problems they had, and obviously Hakkinen put it in the wall a couple times from the lead of races. Yeah, they really should have easily won that year. I mean, they did with the drivers, but I mean, with the constructors as well, they should have easily won both championships. The Woden says Verstappen way better than Vettel. Max is the full package. I wouldn't say way better. I wouldn't. That's not the term I would use, but yeah, definitely better than Vettel in terms of we look at the skills. Better overtaker, Max. In terms of car control, especially in the wet and pace in the wet, Max. And just raw speed, Max. I mean, Vettel, had his strengths obviously in terms of consistency when it came to delivering pole position laps, and his very smooth style and that. But yeah, Max definitely better than Vettel was. Than Vettel was at his peak, no doubt about that. But I'm just going to have a quick drink, and then we're just going to quickly go on to the teams to just quickly get into what teams might need to do strategically going into this race to improve on their grid position or get the best results they can in this Grand Prix. So let me just have a quick drink, and then we will go on to that. So there you go, and we've got 25 minutes to go until lights out. Make sure to vote in the poll in the chat if you haven't already to let me know who you think is going to win this race. And of course, make sure to smash that like button if you haven't already. It does help the channel grow and helps show me that you guys enjoy the content. So make sure to do that in the next 25 minutes before we get into this Qatar Grand Prix at the Lusail circuit, the brilliant Lusail circuit, one of the best new tracks we've had on the calendar in quite a while, I have to say. But anyway, let's go through the teams. And we'll start with Red Bull, who did initially get pole, but then Max was given his silly one-place penalty. If Max can get ahead of Russell at the start, then I think that could be the race-winning move, because the pace difference between Red Bull and Mercedes maybe is going to be in Mercedes' favour, but there won't be a whole lot of difference between the two. We're talking hundredths of a second, maybe a tenth here or there. So, like I said, the start of the race is absolutely crucial to what happens in this Grand Prix for Red Bull. If they get into the lead, I can see Max holding on and winning the race. But if they stay second, and remember Max, of course, on the dirty side of the grid, and we saw the effect that had for Russell yesterday, losing position to Piastri into turn one. If he doesn't get a great start and goes down to third or whatever, then I think at that point, they're probably just fighting for the podium. Red Bull. For Sergio Perez, like I said earlier, I would just start with a hard compound tyre and just see what happens. There's nothing for Perez to lose. Eventually, he'll have good pace later on and should be able to finish in at least 8th place, which is, at least where he should be finishing in this Grand Prix. But yeah, Red Bull absolutely can win the race today. But sadly for them, just too far away in the Constructors' Championship, which probably by the end of this Grand Prix, they will be out of contention for. Ferrari 5th and 7th on the grid. Not really a massive surprise that they are 5th and 7th on the grid. Their pace in qualifying just hasn't been good enough this weekend to be fighting for pole. We do know, though, as we've seen in the last few races, Ferrari and their race pace do tend to be better than what we see in qualifying on a Saturday. And if they can improve by, say, a quarter of a second per lap based on what we saw in qualifying, I think Ferrari are able to fight for the win. I think in clear air, I think they've got the pace to win. It just depends on what can they do, obviously at the start, gaining positions. But really, it's down to what can they do strategically. Whether it's undercutting their way past others or maybe going a bit longer to have fresher tyres for the end. Whatever way is going to work most, they need to go for, because if they can, with an undercut, jump a couple cars that can help them win the race, or maybe go a bit longer by a few laps to have fresher tyres for the end, that could make the difference between finishing maybe 3rd or 4th, or maybe winning this Grand Prix. Leclerc absolutely can win this race. I don't think he will. I think more likely a podium is where he'll end up at best. But, a race win absolutely is on the cards. I would say probably the least likely, though, to win because of his grid position. But do not discount Ferrari. We have seen with them, even from, I think, 4th on the grid before this year, that they have gone on to win the Grand Prix. I think back at, was it Monza, where they ended up winning from P4 on the grid. Obviously, I know that track suited their car a lot more, but you see my point. They can win from 5th on the grid, no doubt about that. Mercedes, the key for George Russell is just hang on to the lead in the first corner and then start to build a gap to Verstappen, and if he can build over a second lead to cut off the possibility of DRS for Max, then that is absolutely fantastic. And if he can do that, then I think Russell will probably just about end up winning this Grand Prix. He has the pace, the Mercedes has the pace, and he's been on fire all weekend. So as long as he delivers in the key moments, I think he should win this Grand Prix. For Lewis Hamilton, again, Mercedes do tend to split their strategy in terms of what tyres they start on, so it'll be interesting to see what tyre Hamilton is going to start on. Would not be surprised if he starts on the hard compound tyre. And if he does, then, once we get after, say, lap 15 or lap 20, we are going to have to definitely watch out for, Lewis Hamilton in this Grand Prix. Because he will be making definitely some progress probably in the second half of the race on fresher and softer tyres if he's got some good pace in hand. So watch out for Hamilton. You can definitely make progress from 6th. And yeah, George Russell, like I said, the start, absolutely key for him. For McLaren, I think, again, in clear air, they've got the best car. But it's getting that clear air, because obviously they're 3rd and 4th. They've got 2 cars ahead of them of Russell and Verstappen who have, good enough pace to not just be easily overtaken. And obviously McLaren also don't have a great top speed, so it's not like McLaren are going to be flying past people on the pit straight. I think really that's what this race is about. Kind of similar to Ferrari, is getting that clear air, especially at moments where they can produce good pace. If they can get enough moments of that in the race, then maybe they can undercut or overcut their way into the lead of the Grand Prix. McLaren can absolutely win today, even maybe get a 1-2. But again, it's all about when they can get into clear air. But if they're going to be stuck in dirty air for, say, the whole race, then there's no way they're going to win. Because, again, they just don't have the straight line speed to be able to get, past Russell and Verstappen. They're just lacking too much straight line speed down the pit straight. So that's really the key for McLaren, is more so strategy. Again, similar to Ferrari. For Aston Martin, you've got Fernando Alonso 8th and on the 4th row of the grid. As long as he can keep Magnussen behind, which will be hard because the Haas is quick, but as long as he can do that, then really all he's got to do is cover off what Haas do with Magnussen, and he should finish in, say, 9th place, which would be a great result for Alonso. Maybe 8th if Sergio Perez is performing poorly, which we have seen this weekend. Perez has been performing extremely poorly. But yeah, as long as they just stick to the correct strategy and just try to cover off whatever Magnussen and the others behind do, then Alonso should be fine. But if they pit too early or pit too late, then I think they will be costing themselves dearly. Racing Bulls, way too slow and way too far down the grid. They've got no chance of points. Alpine have got Pierre Gasly in 11th, who you could say underperformed maybe in that final lap in Q2. Just didn't quite deliver enough, which is why he ended up in 11th. Gasly, I think, has got a chance of finishing in the top 10, but it really depends on how quick the Alpine is compared to not the Haas of Magnussen, but Alonso. If Alonso is slower than the Alpine, then Gasly's got a good chance. But yeah, we'll have to see what the pace difference is between the Alpine and the Aston Martin. Williams, slowest car on the grid this weekend. They've got no chance. Sauber, pretty good weekend so far, but I don't think they've got enough pace to fight, for the top 10. And for Haas, obviously Magnussen in the top 10. He should be finishing really in 9th place if he can, really get after Alonso. That Haas car does have good pace. And then Nico Hülkenberg 18th. We must watch out for him because obviously he was so quick in the sprint, and his car, probably in clear air, the quickest out of the midfield pack. So watch out for Nico Hülkenberg, who may start on the hard tyre and go longer into this race, and that could very much benefit him later on. But we have got, guys, about 15 minutes only to go until the beginning of this Grand Prix. So, just get the timer back on screen in a second, as the national anthem of Qatar is currently being played on the grid. And there you go. 15 minutes remain before we are underway for the formation lap. So yeah, we'll go through a few more of your comments, and then we'll go through some final details before lights out. And make sure to keep smashing that like button, by the way. On 30 likes, let's try and get up to 35 plus if we can, or even 40 plus likes if we can in the next 10 minutes or so. And yeah, by the way, as Rook's saying in the chat, Astro and Woden, please calm down and stop, hurling insults at each other. We're here to enjoy the Qatar Grand Prix, not insult each other. So yeah, please, just calm down. Hello to Brabham. Good to see you, mate. Astro says could be major carnage on the first lap, then a lot of surprise mechanical failure, sand freak incidents, and a final result of Zhou winning his first race ahead of Tsunoda and Colapinto. Do remember, of course, at the start of this Grand Prix last year, we had the two Mercedes cars, second and third on the grid. And then obviously Russell crashed into his teammate Lewis Hamilton. An incident that really has been forgotten about because nothing really came of it. Russell, I think, from what I remember, admitted blame, but yeah, we just moved on really from that. But yeah, we have to remember that that did happen, and it is possible. That first corner it can get tight, especially with how wide these cars are. And with the way the first corner works, it's better to be on the outside line, compared to obviously on the inside line, because the outside line, just has, a lot more momentum. And I think, if I remember last year, it was either Hamilton or Russell came across too much and there was contact. I think it might have been Hamilton actually that just came across too much and there was contact. But yeah, we will see what happens at the start. Hopefully they all get through fine. Herman saying Norris let Piastri pass for the championship. Of course, Lando did let Oscar through in the sprint to pay back Oscar for obviously letting Lando through in Brazil, even though now it doesn't matter because Lando failed to win the championship. But yeah, it was good of Lando to do that because he easily couldn't have done, could have decided not to do that. And also, if you go back and listen, his engineer, right before those final couple corners of the race, his engineer was telling Lando, no need to swap, no need to swap. Because they thought, oh, it's too close for the others. There's no need. But Lando was like, no, I'm going to do it. And he pulled it off to perfection. I will admit, though, when he did it, I thought he was trying to do like a photo finish, like the Schumacher Barrichello one in Indianapolis that time. Was it 2002? I thought they were trying to do that, but yeah, it was good of Lando to repay him the favor, because even next year he will need Oscar to help him if he is obviously the better McLaren driver next year. He will need that help, and as we saw, if you look at the Vettel Weber days at Red Bull, those two in their little rivalry held on to things for years that ended up coming up later on. So, it's good to keep the harmony, because again, he will need Oscar. He will need his help next year if Lando is, in a similar position or a better position. But Astro saying that was a weird one. First passive-aggressive win gift I've seen. Kind of good, but so awkward. Not as awkward as the win in Hungary for Oscar, where Lando made that super awkward. Bravum says it'll be too close to call next year between Oscar and Lando. Hopefully. I do hope Oscar does have like a big step up next year, because he's had some great moments this year. You know, super overtakes, obviously, a couple race wins. But as I said in my podcast, I think a couple episodes ago, he really needs to improve his consistency. That is the thing that he is missing in his game, is consistency. Saying that, though, Lando was the same in his first couple years. Lando would have, a few really good races in a season, but he wouldn't be able to keep that up consistently. And then when Lando's third season came in 2021, Lando was just incredible that year, and was consistently finishing in the top 5, getting brilliant results for McLaren, destroying Ricciardo, his teammate, and just doing a perfect job, really. And yeah, if Oscar can make that improvement that Lando did back then next year, Oscar absolutely can be a championship contender. And I do think when Oscar has the pace, I do think Oscar is better in race situations than Lando is, and just performs better in a race than Lando does. But again, it depends on if Oscar has the pace that particular weekend. When he does, like I said, I think Oscar is better, but in those race situations. But Lando, a lot of the time, is just too quick consistently compared to Oscar. But I'll just read a couple final comments, and then we'll get on to these last couple bits before the race. Astro saying rivalry and tension-wise, really building up Lando versus Oscar-wise. I think 2025 will be very interesting there. Yeah, hopefully, like I said, Oscar improves and it gets even closer, because that's what we want to see. And really, if you look at, where the teams are at the moment in terms of performance, if that stays the way it is at the start of next season, which it kind of, in terms of whether that will realistically happen, I mean, we saw at the start of this season, the pecking order was basically the same as it was at the end of 2023. So there is, given the regulations are pretty much the same next season, pretty good chance that this current pecking order will be the same in in Melbourne, in the first Grand Prix. And if it does remain the same, then really next year's championship contenders should be Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Lando Norris, and Oscar Piastri. Maybe Lewis Hamilton you can throw in there if he gets back to his best, and maybe Kimi Antonelli if he turns up and does like a Lewis Hamilton 2007, which I'd be amazed if he can do, but Antonelli is a very, very talented kid. So, I mean, we could literally have 7 championship contenders next season. But obviously, one must win. And Max is still going to be the favourite, because he is still, until proven otherwise, the best. But let me just finish up this poll in the chat. And hello to Crystal Racing. Good to see you had a good day at football. So yeah, who do you think will win the Qatar Grand Prix of 2024? 243 votes, and 48% of you have voted for Max Verstappen. 25% have gone for George Russell. 21% have gone for Lando Norris, and 5% for Oscar Piastri. Like I said, I disagree. I think Russell is going to win the race, but we will find out, as the F1 intro on the broadcast is now beginning to play. So you know what that means? time to get into a final couple bits of info before this Grand Prix. Firstly, championship standings. Obviously, Max is already the 4-time champion. Lando in second, 24 points clear of Leclerc in third. Oscar in fourth, only 12 points clear of Sainz in fifth. So Oscar does need a good race today if he wants to secure finishing fourth in the championship. Russell in sixth. Russell still has a decent chance maybe of finishing fourth in the championship, especially if he can win today and maybe win next weekend as well. Hamilton seventh, only 12 points behind his teammate. Perez eighth, Alonso ninth, and Nico Hülkenberg in 10th. And on the constructor side, McLaren 30 points clear of Ferrari. I'll get into the permutations for the championship in a moment and what McLaren need to do to win it today. Red Bull in third. Most likely they're not going to win it. They're just too far behind. Mercedes in fourth. Aston Martin fifth. Haas in sixth. Only 3 points clear of Alpine in seventh, who are only 3 points clear of Racing Bulls in eighth. That 3-team fight is very important in terms of money. Williams in ninth and Sauber still pointless in 10th. Let's go through some stats, though, regarding the top teams coming into this event. Max Verstappen, of course, won last year's Racing Qatar and has taken 8 wins in 2024, the most of any driver. Red Bull's last win, of course, 2 races ago in Brazil in those incredibly difficult conditions where Max proved his worth. For Ferrari, of course, they've never won a race in Qatar, but they have taken 5 wins in 2024. Their last win, though, 3 races ago in Mexico, which was about, 5 weeks ago. For Mercedes, they have won here in Qatar before in 2021, with Lewis Hamilton, when they absolutely dominated the weekend. They have taken also 4 wins in 2024, and their last win, obviously last week in Sin City, Las Vegas. Can they get another win 2 weeks in a row? And for McLaren also, they've never won a race in Qatar. McLaren have taken 5 wins, though, in 2024. Their last win, though, 5 races ago in Singapore, 2.5 months it has been since they have won a Grand Prix on a Sunday. Of course, not counting sprint races. And for McLaren, they will be Constructors' Champions today if they outscore Ferrari by 15 points and don't get outscored by 23 points by Red Bull. Like I said earlier, most likely for this to happen, Lando or Oscar are going to have to win this Grand Prix if they're going to win it here in Qatar. But let's now get into your starting grid for the Qatar Grand Prix. On the front row, it is George Russell and Max Verstappen serving his 1-place penalty in second. On the second row, all McLaren second row, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. On the third row, teammates for next season at Ferrari, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. On the fourth row, all Spaniard fourth row, Carlos Sainz and Fernando Alonso. And completing the top 10, Sergio Perez and Kevin Magnussen. Just outside the top 10, Pierre Gasly and Zhou Guanyu. Valtteri Bottas then in 13th with Yuki Tsunoda in P14. 15th and 16th, Lance Stroll and Alexander Albon. The penultimate row is Liam Lawson and Nico Hülkenberg. And on the back row, Franco Colapinto and the Alpine of Esteban Ocon. There you go. There's all the data on screen as usual. I put the letter M there for medium compound tyre. But, of course, I don't know yet officially who is on what compound. We will find that out in a moment. But I am expecting most people to be on the medium compound. As we're seeing George Russell lined up on pole. And definitely the front 5, I think, will be on the medium compound tyres. As Rook's saying in chat, everyone on mediums except Hülkenberg, who is on the hard compound tyres. Thank you for that information. And there you go. So everybody on the medium except Hülkenberg on the hard. Bit surprised there's not maybe a couple more hard compound runners in there. Mercedes have decided not to split their strategies. The formation lap has begun. Russell now just coming through turn 1. Yeah, Mercedes, I think rightfully so, have not split their strategy, but I was expecting it because they have done it quite often. Especially with one driver in a position where they've not really got anything to lose. But it will be a 57-lap Grand Prix. We had, obviously, a sprint race yesterday. That was only 19 laps, which is only a third of the race distance. And the medium tyres held up well enough. So it should be a one-stop race. As they just flashed on screen there on the broadcast. The Lusail circuit celebrating 20 years of being open. Obviously, for years, it hosted MotoGP. I think it still does. And obviously, Formula One came here 2021. And thankfully, they have remained, because this is, like I said earlier, one of the best new tracks we've come to in a long time. It's a proper racetrack. As the top 5 already through the final corner, pretty much, as there is Fred Vasseur on the Ferrari pit wall. What a job he's done turning around Ferrari to the point where, you know, in a year and a half, he took this team from not exactly a dire condition, but not great condition, to on the verge of maybe winning the Constructors' Championship. And really, it is the closest they've come to winning the Constructors' Championship probably since they last won it in 2008. As Lewis Hamilton, we're looking at the rear camera of his car as he's doing some burnouts to get those tyres up to temperature. We're looking at Esteban Ocon, who's just cruising, I think, through the final corner in his pink and black Alpine. Hopefully he can make some progress from 20th. He should do, that car. Even if it's not got the best parts on it, it should be good enough to improve from there. As there is the McLaren boys, we just saw in the garage and on our screen as well. Can McLaren win the Constructors' Championship today and take their first Constructors' title for the first time in 26 years? We're about to find out, as the cars are just about lined up. And here we go. Green flag waving, lights are on. It's 3, 4, 5 lights. And a bit of a long wait, but it is go in Qatar. And Russell just about gets a better start than Verstappen. Verstappen then pulls alongside it. Is he going to go for the inside line? Yes, of course he is, as the McLaren is up there as well. And has had a brilliant start. The McLaren of Lando Norris. Is he going to go for the lead? No. Max keeps it together, but Lando Norris, what a brilliant start by him. He is up to second. Russell down to third, as Piastri's down to fifth, with Leclerc gaining, as we've got a yellow flag in Sector 1. Don't know who for. As Lando, not Lando, Oscar, side by side with a Ferrari of Carlos Sainz, and it's Colapinto, who looks like he's crashed, as Sainz trying to go around the outside of Piastri, but not quite doing so into turn 8. As they continue to race. No safety car. So, yeah, there you go. Safety car is now deployed. And the pack calms down as Lewis Hamilton, I think, has had a pretty, Hamilton's had a pretty bad start. And there you go. Colapinto and Ocon both crashing into one another. And they are both out of this Grand Prix. So, let me just update. That is also a Haas of Nico Hulkenberg has a puncture. Luckily for him, a safety car, so he's not going to lose any ground because of it, but he'll have to change his tyres, obviously. But it is on now lap 2 under the safety car. Max Verstappen leads from Lando Norris, George Russell third. Horrible start for Russell. Just didn't get a good enough getaway and then got in the wrong position through the first corner. And then Leclerc fourth, Piastri fifth, Sainz sixth, Perez seventh, Hamilton down in ninth behind Alonso, who's eighth. And then you got Tsunoda 10th. What a start from him. 14th to 10th. And then Magnussen, Gasly, and the rest we'll get onto in a moment. Here's a replay of the start. Russell had a slightly quicker reaction time, but in the second phase, the Red Bull was just better. And then Max obviously was always going to take the inside line. Lando, though, gained a lot by going for the inside, got past Russell, and then really had his car just about ahead of Max going into turn 2, but he didn't think of trying to get around the outside like Leclerc did to Hamilton in the sprint in that corner. Yeah, clean, solid move from Verstappen. And then, so Hulkenberg ran wide, went a bit too deep and ran into Ocon, who then ran into Colapinto. So that's looks to me to be Nico Hulkenberg's fault completely. And here's a replay from Ocon's on board. So he's in the middle of the track, and then Hulkenberg. Well, they weren't really side by side, so I think maybe Ocon ran into the back there of Hulkenberg, but Hulkenberg got a swapper on. Let's just see from Hulkenberg's on board. Yeah, went too deep, and then he braked too hard trying to avoid someone, and then spun into Ocon, who then hit Colapinto. So that's really unfortunate there. Big contact between Albon and Stroll. Albon getting hit massively by Stroll, and that might be a broken suspension for the Williams. Wouldn't be surprised if it was. As Stroll was up the inside into turn 4. And yeah, contact was made. I mean, to be fair, I'm not really sure what Stroll could have done more. He was steering right. He didn't understeer into Albon, really. So I think that's just a racing incident, really. Yeah, Albon kind of came across to a degree. Not really that much, but yeah, to a degree he did. So, yeah, I'd say that's a racing incident between Albon and Stroll. Hopefully they can continue, though. As we're on lap 3, I'll update the lap counter in a moment. But yeah, Magnussen is in 11th. Then you've got Gasly, Bottas, Lawson, Zhou, Albon, Stroll, Hulkenberg, and then, yeah, Ocon and Colapinto are definitely out of the Qatar Grand Prix. But as soon as their cars are cleared away, we'll be back underway. So, not too eventful of a start. But if there is significant damage to Albon's car, we might already have 3 retirements. It could be both Williams's. Williams don't need any more retirements from contact. The amount of money they have spent this year in, damage, repairs, and stuff like that has been way more than any other team. But safety car's still out and probably will be out for another lap. I think probably end of lap 4. We'll see the safety car venture back to where it belongs, whereas the end of the pit lane. But I will say, with the order the way it is, this is great news for Max Verstappen, because he's not going to be under threat from Norris behind in terms of Lando having a load of straight line speed, because the Red Bull has 5 kilometers an hour more speed down the pit straight. So he's got exactly who he wants behind him. And I think also Max knows that he can easily keep Lando behind him. Lando not exactly has been not exactly successful at overtaking Verstappen much this season. So yeah, Max I think is happy to have Norris behind him rather than Russell or Leclerc. So all looking good for Max for now, but we'll see how the race goes once we get properly underway, as Hulkenberg has joined the rear of the snake behind the safety car. Hulkenberg, I would imagine, is still on the hard compound tyres, and yes, he is. Doesn't want to give up that strategy, but at least, if Hulkenberg's car isn't any more damaged than than the puncture he had, then he should be able to continue on just fine. But I don't think Hulkenberg should get a penalty for what happened at turn 1. Because, he spun trying to avoid crashing into a Williams of Albon, and then ended up hitting Ocon, who then hit Colapinto. It was just unfortunate set of circumstances, really. So, yeah, just 2 racing incidents, I would say, on that first lap. And, yeah, safety car will be coming in at the end of lap 4. And like I said, Max will be very happy that it is the McLaren behind him who's definitely not going to be a threat to turn 1 unless Max absolutely bottles this restart, which normally he does not. He is probably the best at these restarts, as they're just into the last 3 or 4 corners now. Or last couple corners they're almost into. Max still weaving around, doesn't need to get going yet. Green flag now. That means the safety car has come back to the pits. So Max, it's up to him when he lets go and goes for it. And there you go. In between the 2 final corners, he has decided to go for it. And through the final corner, gets a good exit. And McLaren not too far behind, but he should be fine. Because like I said, the McLaren not very quick down the straights. But Norris has got Russell right behind him as Piastri trying to pass Leclerc. And he does. Oscar Piastri gets the position. Brilliant restart from Oscar as Hamilton is side by side. And there's a racing Bulls car in the background. Lawson that has spun off. Not sure if he was hit. But Lewis Hamilton was side by side with the racing Bulls car of Tsunoda. As Alonso's had a poor start, he's dropped 2 positions. Yeah, Ferrari now 5th and 6th. As Lawson down to 18th. With Stroll in 17th. And Stroll, I think, is also pitted. And he's also on the hard compound tyres now. As we're on lap 5 of 57. So let me just update Stroll and Hulkenberg on the hards. Lawson on the mediums. And then we've got Albon in 15th. And then Bottas behind Zhou. And then, yeah, top 10 on lap 5. Max Verstappen leading by 0.8 of a second from Norris. Russell 3rd. Piastri 4th. Piastri right behind Russell as well. And then Leclerc 5th. Sainz 6th. Perez 7th. Hamilton right up behind Perez in 8th. And Tsunoda 9th. And Kevin Magnussen has just overtaken Fernando Alonso for 10th. So Alonso having a disaster out there right now, as we're now on lap 6 of 57. Quite a lot of dust and sand on the pit straight, which will dirty up the tyres a bit. As Max just over a second clear now of Norris, which is key for him. As now Alonso has been overtaken again by Gasly. I'm beginning to think that Alonso has probably got a problem with his car. As here's a replay of what happened to Lawson. He was side by side with Zhou, it looks like. And then just got oversteer in the middle of the corner. Went too deep probably and then spun. So just a poor driving error there from the Kiwi. As things starting now to settle down. And Alonso saying, man, the speed on the straight is worrying. It shouldn't be. Alonso was the quickest driver in the speed trap in qualifying, so I don't know why he's getting swamped by everyone. Maybe there's an engine issue. Who knows? DRS is now enabled, by the way. So Oscar Piastri, who is within a second of Russell, can use it. Norris, though, not within a second of Verstappen, who is about 1.1 clear of Lando. That's two Ferraris dropping quite a bit behind the top four of Verstappen, Norris, Russell, Piastri, which is worrying for them. McLaren currently heading for 30 points. Ferrari heading for 18. That's a gain of 12 points. McLaren just need 3 more points. And they'll be Constructors' champions. As Max Verstappen does the fastest lap and is pulling away now from Norris, pulling the gap up to 1.5 seconds. As looks like it's starting to space out now, the field. People are now settling in, probably starting already to manage their tyres to try and make sure they extend their stint. Somehow, by the way, Liam Lawson has overtaken Lance Stroll despite that spin. So I'm thinking Stroll has either made a mistake or he's got damage to his car from the contact with Albon. But yeah, that's what's going on down there. As Max Verstappen does another fastest lap on lap 8 and continues to pull away from what was his main championship rival. Looks a lot closer in the midfield from Tsunoda, really, down to Bottas. As Lance Stroll has been given a 10-second penalty for causing a collision with Alex Albon. I think that's harsh. I think that's harsh. And Stroll has been told to box to retire the car. So clearly, too much damage. So already 3 retirements, so we're not even a third of the way through this Qatar Grand Prix. As Max Verstappen, by the way, already 2 seconds clear of Lando Norris. He is having a great time out there. As Lance Stroll, for some reason, has come into the pits and come back out again. So I no idea what that's about, but let me just put his tyre back. There you go. As Lando starting to gain back some time on Verstappen. Norris about second clear of Russell. Piastri still just about within the DRS window of Russell. As Max still does a fastest lap of a 1:26.2. Max, by the looks of it, very quick in the first half of the lap. As Alonso saying, I cannot fucking believe it, man. 2 years with the same shit problem and something else. Alonso rightfully moaning about how shit that Aston Martin car is. Something he does not deserve. He has been brilliant in these last couple years, but Aston Martin have not fulfilled their end of the bargain whatsoever. And that's why Lando lost time on the previous lap. He dipped his front left into the gravel at turn 4. And that's a replay of Alonso going wide. And I think that's how he lost position to Magnussen. And then just after would have lost position to Gasly. As well as Lewis Hamilton has been noted for a false start. Now, Piastri got a penalty for a false start last week in Vegas. We'll see what Hamilton will get. You'd think it'll be the same penalty, which would be 5 seconds. As Hamilton only 0.6 of a second behind Perez. Hamilton has got to get ahead of Perez. As it appears to be, I think, more of a jump start. He says, sorry about that, guys. Yeah, doesn't look like It looks like he moved right before the lights and then maybe stopped again. So yeah, that's a slam dunk. I know he didn't gain anything from it, but he should still get a penalty. And Lance Stroll, by the way, has now pitted to retire. So he is done. 3 retirements by lap 10 as Piastri still harrying Russell, who is falling away from Norris in second. Max in the lead, 2 seconds clear of Norris. As Lewis Hamilton still stuck behind Perez. The most worrying thing to me is Ferrari. They've got absolutely no pace right now. And Sainz, about second behind Leclerc. I wouldn't say Carlos is being held up by Leclerc, but Ferrari are going absolutely nowhere right now by the looks of it, as that was Magnussen and Tsunoda at turn 1, was it? And it was. Brilliant move by Magnussen. Even had to dip a wheel into the gravel to get it done. As the Bottas-Lawson incident at turn 1 under investigation for causing a collision. Magnussen up to 9th. And really, that's where Magnussen really now needs to hold position. As Tsunoda and Gasly racing close through turn 1 and 2. Obviously, great friends. Ex-teammates, but Gasly and Alpine desperately need this position to try and fight Haas, obviously, as they are in the championship. As Gasly complaining that Tsunoda is moving under braking. We hear that a lot. We heard Russell complain about that in the sprint, about Piastri, as Carlos Sainz has done a purple first sector. I'm sure DRS helped with that. But yeah, Ferrari, Leclerc is, what? I think almost 6 seconds off the lead, and it's lap 11. So Ferrari are losing probably about 0.4 of a second a lap to the leader, which is concerning. As now on lap 12, Max Verstappen does another fastest lap, as Liam Lawson now gets a 10-second penalty. For causing the collision. Max were 125.8, that fastest lap. As Piastri still within a second of Russell, as Russell almost 2 seconds behind Norris now. And yeah, Leclerc is 3.5 seconds behind Piastri. So yeah, Leclerc currently is how far? 4.7. Yeah, Leclerc's even further off the lead than I actually than I said. I got my calculations wrong. He's more like 8 seconds off the lead. So yeah, very concerning pace from Ferrari, who are losing, by the looks of it, 3/4 of a second per lap to the leader, and losing about half a second a lap to Norris in second. As we look at this Tsunoda-Gasly fight, which is just continuing, and Alonso hanging about in the background, waiting for an opportunity, as Tsunoda isn't letting Magnussen fly off into the distance just yet. But in terms of the top 8, I mean, you've got, Piastri now outside of DRS on Russell, but the only battle really is Perez and Hamilton, but Hamilton's not able to fight. But here comes Pierre Gasly on Tsunoda. Round the outside, Gasly goes. Brilliant move, and Pierre Gasly is up to 10th place. Very important for Alpine. Now Gasly only just over a second behind Magnussen. If you can beat Magnussen, even though that's only 1 point they'll take away from Haas, remember they're only 3 points behind Haas. So every point matters is a replay of Zhou. I think his view behind the Lawson-Bottas incident. And yeah. Yeah. Again, I'm not sure a 10-second penalty is worthy of that incident with Lawson. Again, same thing with Stroll. There wasn't actually, I don't know if it was for forcing another driver on the track, but I don't think there was actually any contact between the two. But nonetheless, Lawson has a penalty and is last currently, as Lando Norris does the fastest lap, interestingly, 1:25.7. As Lewis Hamilton under investigation now for a false start, as Hamilton's race being destroyed by the slow Sergio Perez he's stuck behind. And Pierre Gasly matching Magnussen for pace, so that fight is going to continue, or going to start going in a minute. As Alonso round the outside of Tsunoda at turn 1. Brilliant move by the 40-plus-year-old Spaniard, who, of course, had a podium here in 2021. And Lewis Hamilton has been given a 5-second penalty for a false start. For Hamilton, luckily for him, Kevin Magnussen is 8 seconds behind him, so he's not going to lose any position because of it. All he'll have to do is take that 5 seconds, obviously, at his pit stop. So Mercedes will have to plan around that in terms of the strategy. As no further investigation for Alonso rejoining unsafely when he went off the track when he was overtook by Magnussen, which is good to see. As we're on lap 15, and Lando, as Leclerc has now done the fastest lap of the race, somehow, 25.6. Maybe Ferrari have just been looking after their tyres and babying their tyres. But Lando starting to match Verstappen and keep the gap at about 2 seconds, as here comes Zhou Guanyu round the outside of Tsunoda, and Zhou up to help Tsunoda, obviously out of position. The Racing Bulls car is not quick enough to be a top 10 runner, but Zhou up to 12th place. As Piastri is about, within a second, I think, of Russell, just about, as they're coming towards the final sector. Piastri needs to keep within a second of Russell. Keep getting that DRS and keep Russell under pressure, because that will keep Russell, it'll force Russell to have to use more of his tyres than he wants to. And yeah, great move there by Zhou, who's having probably the best race weekend of his season. As on lap 16, Lando Norris does another fastest lap. So, and we have seen this before, that in the second half of a tyre stint, McLaren end up becoming the faster team. And that's exactly what's happening. As this stint is rolling on and we are getting near the pit window, McLaren are getting quicker. That's why Piastri is getting closer to Russell as well. So McLaren are coming alive in this Qatar Grand Prix. That's Tsunoda now under pressure from Bottas, but Bottas not close enough to overtake. But yeah, watch out for McLaren now. They, like I said, they are really starting to come alive in this Grand Prix. One thing I am surprised about, maybe he's got some damage from the collision earlier, but Hülkenberg has not moved from 16th place. So, yeah, maybe he does have some damage to his car. That's Piastri we're looking at on board. Really starting to close in on Russell now in the final couple corners. He's going to get DRS. Again, though, the problem I mentioned before the race is McLaren have one of the slowest straight line speeds. There's all big oversteer moment for Piastri in the final corner. He nearly spun. And that would have cost him quite a lot of time, as Lando Norris does another Fastest lap, and the gap now down to 1.6 seconds. Piastri still miraculously only a second behind Russell, despite that giant snap of oversteer. It's a shame he had that because he was really starting to home in on Russell, but yeah, he just carried. I think he was maybe slightly understeering through the final corner anyway, and just applied the throttle too early. Tried to fight against the understeer and created his own oversteer. Yeah, your top 10 on lap 17, 40 laps to go. Max Verstappen leading by just under 2 seconds from Lando Norris. George Russell 3rd, Piastri 4th, Leclerc 5th, Sainz 6th, Perez 7th, Hamilton 8th, Magnussen 9th, and Pierre Gasly in 10th. As for Leclerc saying, let's check pressures, tyre pressures, the way I drive, puncture is likely. And then Charles being told, pressures are fine. So clearly he thinks there's something wrong with the tyres as to why he's slow. As Lando does another fastest lap. Like I said, as the stint goes on, McLaren just get better and better. 25.3 for Norris. Max is pushing hard to keep Lando at bay, but he's not keeping Lando at bay. Lando is just slightly closing in each lap. It's a great fight out front between those two, both lapping at pretty similar speed, even though Lando is just going quicker just about each lap. As Pierre Gasly now right up behind Magnussen on the exit of turn 1, only half a second behind. Crucial that Gasly overtakes Magnussen, because even if they only outscore Haas by a point today, that's, puts them a point closer, and that means they'd be only 2 points behind Alpine. Alpine would only be 2 points behind Haas going into the final race. A final race where Alpine could definitely do what's necessary to finish 6th of the championship, a position that really Alpine don't deserve to finish in. The only reason they're in this position of fighting for that is because of the 2nd and 3rd place finish they had in Brazil. But, that's the way it works in Formula 1. As Max Verstappen now does a fastest lap, a 1:25.0, but only goes slightly quicker than Lando. Like I said, lapping at a very similar pace out front are the two, Max and Lando. As George Russell now 4.2 seconds behind Norris. So Russell out of action, really, in terms of fighting for this win. He's really just fighting for the podium now as Gasly closes on Magnussen. But nowhere near close enough. But yeah, Piastri's dropped 1.7 behind Russell now, so needs to try and get back in the rhythm if he's going to try and pass Russell. Leclerc is gaining on Piastri, though. Only a couple seconds behind now. But Leclerc in the Ferrari, the highest placed Ferrari, is currently about 10 seconds off the lead. So they're not losing as much time, Ferrari, as they were to the leader in the first few laps. They've stopped the rot to a degree, but they're still nowhere near in a position to be able to fight for the win here. But they are getting quicker. So they're still in there, and they're still going to be contenders for that podium. As we're looking at Bottas on board. Behind Tsunoda. And Bottas, for once, actually gets to race people in a decently paced car. Even though they're still racing for 13th. As Bottas opens DRS down the pit straight. Has he got enough top speed? Tsunoda defends. Bottas goes for the outside line. And Bottas completes the move. And yeah, Sauber, as we've seen, quicker than Racing Bulls here. So no surprise, Bottas up to 13th. Sauber now back to where they started the race from, in 12th and 13th place. And Zhou in 12th is about 6 seconds, I think, away from a point. So still there, but likely not to finish in the points, of course. As lap 21, Max Verstappen does another fastest lap, but only goes a few hundredths of a second quicker than Norris, 1:24.8. As Russell, by the way, in third, dropping a lot of time now to Norris. Gap now 5.2. As Russell is out of the fight for the win. He just has not got the pace. And Piastri now starting to home in on the Mercedes driver, as the Ferrari's not really getting any closer to Piastri. So really, Russell has got 3 drivers catching him. Not very quickly, but still catching him gradually, which is Piastri, Leclerc, Sainz. But I will say, even though they're not fighting wheel to wheel on track, this is a great little battle going on up front between Max and Lando. You know, lapping within a tenth of a second of each other. The gap's been about 1.7 to 1.9 seconds for quite a long time now. And they're just, you know, duking it out on lap time. Obviously, Lando's trying to get close enough for an undercut. Max trying to keep Lando at bay, which he is doing, as the gap remains at 1.8 on lap 22. Yeah, great fight going on up front, even though they're not fighting wheel to wheel. Here's a replay of Bottas at turn 2, running wide and getting wheel in the gravel, but he barely lost any time from that. Would have lost probably 2 or 3 tenths. Tsunoda's already far behind him, so no issue there. As Russell really suffering now 6.1 behind Norris, and Oscar Piastri is now just 7 tenths of a second behind. So Russell, I think he is probably going to be coming into the pits very soon, because his tyres are really starting to suffer. Because Ferrari's also still catching. And here we go, on board with Piastri. And if he just doesn't have that oversteer moment again and just keeps in the DRS, he will eventually have a go at Russell, because Russell is just going slower and slower and slower. And the McLaren is just getting quicker and quicker and quicker. As Piastri into the final corner, as Lando Norris has the fastest lap on lap 23. Slightly wide on the exit there from Piastri, but he's got the DRS and he's gaining on Russell down the straight. He's not going to have a go because he's too far back. But yeah, if he's a bit closer, a couple tenths of a second or so closer the next time around, then Oscar is going to get this move done, because he is a lot quicker than Russell. Russell's has no pace. And Mercedes in general don't have any pace. Lewis Hamilton has dropped over 2 seconds behind Perez. As is a replay of Piastri, and he was a bit too aggressive, a bit too trigger happy on the throttle, coming out the final corner. But you can see Leclerc not very far behind him either. So the longer Piastri gets held up here, the Ferraris will join the fight, as Leclerc is now within a couple seconds of Piastri. So gotta make sure he gets this move done, or else the others will join the fight, as Max is about 1.9 clear of Lando on lap 24. And Mercedes now pitting George Russell. It had to happen. His tyres had gone. But he's the first to pit, and he should come out in, what, 8th? Something like that. As, oh, slow pit stop. 7 seconds, the pit stop. That is disastrous. And he will now drop behind Magnussen, Gasly, Alonso. And that's cost him dearly. So Russell now in 11th place. As Lewis asking how far are we off the front runners. And as Lewis asking is the car broken because he's just been told that he's 1.2 seconds per lap slower than Max in the lead. Which is, yeah, pretty bad. It's not necessarily his fault though. Mercedes just haven't been very quick today. But yeah, Russell, that is his podium chances gone up in smoke because he's lost, 5 seconds there. And that's, now Piastri, Leclerc and Sainz can do probably an extra 2 to 3 laps and probably still come out ahead, maybe. Maybe not Sainz, but Piastri and Leclerc probably could. So that is going to benefit them massively in this race. But on lap 25, Max still 1.9 clear of Norris. Piastri 8 seconds behind Norris in 3rd. Leclerc 2 seconds behind Piastri. And then Sainz in 5th, 3 seconds behind Leclerc. So obviously still this fight going on between Max and Lando for the win. And then the fight for the podium, Piastri, Leclerc, Sainz, Russell. Russell obviously is already pitted. Valtteri Bottas, by the way, has just pitted from 13th. Leclerc is, about 12 seconds off the lead. So, yeah, I think we can definitely say that the only two in the fight for the win is Verstappen and Norris. And everyone else fighting for the rest. As Leclerc is still gaining on Piastri. The pace of the Ferrari is still good enough to probably see him on the podium, but it's going to be tough. As Piastri and Leclerc staying out there. Yeah, Bottas has come out at the back now, presumably on hard compound tyres. So let me just update that. So Bottas on the hard, Lawson obviously on the medium, and then Hulkenberg on the hard tyre. Russell still in 11th. Hasn't really been quickly catching Alonso. It's only been a few tenths quicker in the last lap or so, which I would have expected more, if I'm honest. So Russell not lapping very quickly. And obviously for a few corners, he's going to be stuck behind Alonso. So, yeah, Russell's race is absolutely destroyed. I think the best Russell can get now out of this race is probably 5th or 6th. Yeah, a shame. But also we have to note that Mercedes' pace was pretty bad in the laps leading up to that pit stop. So they weren't looking very good either. As through turn 10, Russell really gaining that much on Alonso. As we're on lap 27, almost halfway through this Qatar Grand Prix. Just to say, as usual, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because, of course, we'll do plenty of watch-alongs next year. And for the final race, of course, next week in Abu Dhabi, I'll be doing a qualifying and race watch-along for next weekend's final Grand Prix. Yeah, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new. And for everybody watching, smash that like button. As Lewis says, the car is slowly beginning to turn on its own. As Russell, DRS open, tries to pass Alonso, but not close enough. And this is what I mean. He's not really that much quicker than Fernando, even though he's on fresh, hard tyres. As Piastri, obviously, who stayed out, is 34 seconds ahead of Russell. Obviously, if Piastri was to pit now, he would come out way ahead of Russell, as Russell says the car's just not turning. So you got Lewis's car that's turning by itself, and George's car just isn't turning. Sums up Mercedes' issues to a degree this season. They've just been all over the place. Certain races, they look like world champion material. Certain races, they look absolutely dreadful. You just don't know what Mercedes you're going to get, even just from one session to the next, which is something they've got to fix next year. As Russell's still stuck behind Alonso. And I'm not sure Russell is even going to be close enough to overtake Alonso into turn one this time. Well, he looked closer, so we'll see. As Russell coming down the pit straight, and Fernando, what's he going to do? Let him through? No, Russell nowhere near the back of him. Russell not even, can't overtake him. So yeah, Russell just has no pace. As Kevin Magnussen, by the way, has pitted from 8th. So Magnussen comes out on fresh, hard tyres. Good pit stop. Magnussen now 16th, but obviously in a net good position. As here's a replay of Hamilton at turn 2, running oversteering. And yeah, his car looks absolutely dreadful to drive, but his car has looked pretty dreadful to drive for quite a lot of the season, so not exactly a surprise. As we're on lap 29, so yeah, halfway through this Grand Prix that has not been great, but don't go away yet, because it is still close up front. You've got Verstappen still only 1.9 clear of Norris. They're still lapping at the same pace out front, and that battle is gonna heat up. Trust me. As Russell tries to go to the inside of Alonso, but he still can't pass him. He just doesn't have any pace. I mean, he's quicker than Fernando. That's clear to see, but fresh hard tires, the pace advantage he doesn't have. So I don't know if it's just because staying out longer is working better, or that Mercedes is just awfully slow right now. I don't know. Yellow flag in the first sector, and I think it's for Max Verstappen, who has lost a lot of time and is now only 1.1 seconds clear of Lando Norris. Now only a second. Repeatedly, it's going green and yellow and green and yellow again. As we're on lap 30, and yes, something has fallen off a car there, as we now are on lap 30, and Verstappen suddenly, during that period, has lost 7 or 8 tenths of a second. So I'm wondering whether Max has either hit somebody, say if he's been lapping someone, or whether something's flown off his car. As here comes Russell. Will he finally overtake Alonso? No. Alonso not exactly letting through, but he's not exactly putting up a defense either. And yeah, Max now has Lando just 1.2 seconds behind. Perfect for an undercut, but does the undercut work? But I'd be very interested. Is it Alex Albon? And yep, it is Alex Albon. So something's flown off the rear of his car. But yeah, Max Verstappen out of nowhere just lost 7 or 8 tenths of a second in one lap. So I do wonder whether Max has made a mistake somewhere out there that hasn't been shown yet. As we're lap 31. The top 9 still haven't pitted. Russell in 10th. He is the highest placed driver to have pitted as Max now got the gap back up to 1.5 seconds. So if he did make a mistake, he's back in the groove now. That's Verstappen, yeah, continuing to pull away. So it'll be interesting to see. Maybe he did what Piastri did in the final corner. Maybe had a snap of oversteer, because he definitely lost a lot of time there, nearly a second. But looks to be all okay now. As he comes through the final corner and begins lap 32. Now 1.6 seconds clear of Lando Norris, and does a fastest lap of a 1:24.4. These two definitely don't need to pit. They've still got plenty of pace in the bag. And we've only got 25 laps to go, so I wonder when they will pit. As Ferrari have come out twice now for a pit stop, and their drivers have said, or the team has said, no. As Leclerc, by the way, still about 2 seconds behind Piastri, who's 9 seconds, the Australian, behind his teammate Lando Norris. George Russell, by the way, still stuck behind Fernando Alonso, so we can, I think, pretty much count Russell out of this race in terms of being in contention. Can't even pass Alonso on fresh tyres and in a much faster car, supposedly. But right now, lapping pretty much at the same speed. Fernando may, you could say, be going quicker. But the thing is with Russell is if they had left Russell out, he probably would have got overtaken by Piastri, maybe Leclerc, as Hülkenberg now pits and he'll drop probably to the back of the field. Hülkenberg clearly has got damage to his car from that collision early on the first lap. But he's gone nowhere in this Grand Prix, as he pits on lap 33 for a set of mediums. Maybe something will happen now. He's switched on to those. But yeah, he actually comes out ahead of Bottas. But the very back of the field now, Bottas and Hülkenberg now starting to be lapped. So lapped traffic will start having its effect. As Hülkenberg 16th on the medium compound. Magnussen on the hard compound tyre, of course, and then Lawson on the medium. And the only drivers out there on the hard tyre, Russell, Magnussen, Bottas. I will let you know in a moment whether would you call it? Whether, as Max is now 2.5 seconds clear of Norris, McLaren, if the undercut can work, may have missed the boat there to do the undercut, but looks to me, honestly, like the overcut works better, because I was going to say, I was going to let you guys know with Magnussen whether he's dropped time to Gasly, who of course has stayed out there. But yeah, Gasly is currently, yeah, well, I think Gasly is over a pit stop clear of Magnussen, so the undercut is not working at all for the drivers that have done it. As Leclerc, about, what, 0.3 of a second closer now to Piastri. 1.7 seconds now the gap, as Leclerc trying to apply the blowtorch of pressure. If Leclerc can get third out of this race, then I think that would be a job well done for him and for Ferrari. That's the best they're going to get today. And as it stands, McLaren are heading for 33 points. Ferrari heading for 22. That's only a gain of 11. McLaren need to try and gain. As, Lewis Hamilton's got a puncture. And similar So I remember when Russell had a puncture here in the Williams back in 2021. It's the front left tyre, I think. He's sparking away like mad. As I think for some reason Carlos Sainz has lost a lot of time. I wonder if Sainz has got a problem as well. Because yeah, Carlos Sainz has just dropped nearly 10 seconds to his teammate. As Oscar Piastri now pits, and yeah, Carlos Sainz has got a puncture as well. The Hamilton and Sainz in trouble as Piastri now pits, so their tyres have said, yep, I'm done. So Piastri pits, Leclerc stays out. And Piastri will come out behind Perez. Perez somehow is in 4th place with only just over 20 laps to go. And yes, Sainz now comes in with his puncture. Gasly up to 7th. Hamilton still hasn't made it back to the pits yet. Sainz gets the new tyres on and back out there. Nearly 10, or pretty much a 10-second pit stop. Well, that spiced things up as Russell is now 7th. He's now ahead of Alonso. And then you've got Zhou 9th. Sainz in 10th. Yep, as a safety car has been deployed, and I'm guessing for debris from the tyres. And maybe also because of the risk of other tyre failures. As Lewis on the radio saying, trust me to have this lock. As Verstappen and Norris pit. And Hamilton, I think, yeah, Hamilton has now dropped a lap behind Max. Hamilton now down in 15th place. Of course, I'll update the order when I can. But Norris and Leclerc pitting. Now, that has worked out horribly for Piastri. He pitted when it was green flag, and now Leclerc pits under the safety car. Leclerc is going to come out in 3rd place. Also working out very well for Sergio Perez, who, even though he's pretty slow, at least he can manage his tyres, which is benefiting him in this instance. That's very good pit stop, 2.2 seconds there. And Perez is going to be 5th on the road. So we're under a safety car, lap 36. It is Verstappen leading, Norris 2nd, Leclerc 3rd, Piastri 4th, Perez 5th, Gasly 6th, as Russell now pits. So yeah, Pierre Gasly is 6th, and he's just pitted as well. Alonso pitting, everyone who hasn't pitted yet obviously coming in for a stop. So it'll be Gasly 6th, Russell 7th, Alonso 8th, Zhou 9th, Sainz 10th, Tsunoda 11th. Oh no, Sainz is now 9th. Sainz now 8th, actually. Somehow he's gained a couple positions because he pitted before Alonso and Zhou. Magnussen's been screwed over by this quite a bit. He's now 11th. Tsunoda 12th. Albon 13th. Lawson 14th. Hulkenberg 15th. Hamilton 16th. Bottas 17th. That is your order on lap 36. Just all of a sudden, just one lap, bang, and chaos ensued. That's how quick things can change in Formula One. As the safety car is going to go through the pit lane, and that'll be to pick up the debris on the pit straight. As well, here you go, safety car going in the pit lane. That would be to pick up the debris laying around the track. As Russell asking, why we put hards on? Why have we put the fucking hards back on? Their shit. That's what he said. I'm just translating. But, yeah. And, Valtteri Bottas ran over that debris when he let through Piastri and Leclerc, and I wonder if that's what gave Lewis Hamilton and then Carlos Sainz the punctures. Could be. But let me just get all the tyres correct. And the only person on mediums, I believe, is Nico Hulkenberg. So there you go. Still 17 cars in this Grand Prix. On lap 37, still got about 20 laps to go of this Qatar Grand Prix. So, yeah. And, yeah, the safety car, as I can see Nib in chat. Hopefully, the football's going well. Yeah, the safety car, I think, rightfully deployed because clearly those punctures were due to debris. And you don't want loads of cars just suddenly getting punctures. Well, that has hurt Ferrari because obviously now Sainz is down in 8th. We've got the two McLaren still in the top 4, Leclerc in 3rd at least, but that has hurt Ferrari. As it stands under this safety car, McLaren are scoring 30 points. Ferrari are scoring 19. So it's still only a gain of 11 points. So the championship will still go on to Abu Dhabi. But it's put Ferrari closer to the knife edge. That's a replay of Magnussen going side by side with a Racing Bulls car, I think, out of the pit lane. No, it was Alonso, who I think, Alonso. I think Alonso there put on the medium tyres, which if that's true, then he's committing to a 2-stop. Unless he's already pitted twice, but I don't think he has. As they come through the pit lane once again. But should be underway probably in, I'd say, another 2 or 3 laps. Because it's not a ton of debris that they need to clear out there. And then hopefully we'll have a good final 18 laps or so of racing to finish off what's been a pretty mediocre Qatar Grand Prix so far, I must say. But tyre failures, once again, something we have seen here in Qatar, but for different reasons, I think, this time. Because F1 was doing pretty well on their tyres. As Lewis Hamilton braking repeatedly and causing Lando to nearly go in the back of him, which I think Lewis will get away with. I don't quite know why Lewis is doing that, but he is. As Hamilton and Bottas, who used to dominate Formula One as a partnership, are the only 2 cars lapped, and they now may unlap themselves, as the safety car now is allowed to use the start-finish straight. So probably by the end of lap 39, we will be back underway. And whilst there is a safety car, let me just check what is going on with the football. Right. So good to see that you're winning. Also, what a win from my team earlier against Villa. Some brilliant goals as well. But yeah, fingers crossed that Liverpool can hang on. Man City have only had 1 shot. Probably the first time that's happened in one half of football for them. As now we're on lap 39, and the safety car now using the pit straight. As it stands, Alpine with Gasly, as yep, safety car in at the end of this lap. Gasly's in 6th place, and if he was to finish there and Haas finish where they are, Alpine will go 5 points clear of Haas in 6th in the championship. So this is crucial for Alpine. All they got to do is make sure they score points and finish ahead of Haas. I mean, Russell and Sainz behind Gasly should overtake him, but if he can hold on Gasly then to 8th, and Magnussen's on older tyres in 11th place. So if Magnussen can't get back into the points and Gasly does hold on for 8th, then Gasly will put Alpine back into 6th by just 1 point going into the final race. As safety car in at the end of this lap. As we're coming into the final sector, and now the safety car heading for the pit lane, Max will now become the safety car. And Alonso is on another set of mediums, so he is going to have to pit again because he hasn't used another set of tyres in this race, I'm pretty sure. So, and Alonso is actually behind Zhou, so I need to correct that, actually. This is also great, as what's happening for Perez? Sergio Perez is dropping down the field, and I think Perez might have broke down. What a disaster for Sergio Perez. As Max, through the final corner, lets it go, but Lando is right on his tail down the pit straight. As they begin lap 40, this is Lando's chance if he's going to win McLaren the Constructors today. Will he take the outside line? Yes, he does, but Max forces his way up the inside and pushes Lando slightly wide. Oh, now Gasly has gone wide, but Verstappen, with some hard defense, keeps the lead. As Leclerc and Piastri side by side, Leclerc keeps 3rd place. Russell up to 5th. As Sergio Perez just fell down the order right as the safety car pulled in. And yellow flag in sector 3. Now it's green, so I've no idea what's going on back there. Russell 5th. Gasly now 6th. And we're seeing a mini replay in the top right-hand screen. And Perez, what an absolute joke of a driver he has become. He spun. He fucking spun under a safety car. That's Hulkenberg who's put it in the gravel. They've all fucked it up. And that's going to be another safety car. Yep, there you go. And Perez has parked his car and decided that he's done. What an absolute joke. I don't know if maybe he spun because he had an engine failure or something, but wow. What a messy restart that was. So Sergio Perez and Nico Hulkenberg now out of this race. We've only got now 15 cars left in this Grand Prix. So let me just quickly update as both Racing Bulls coming in for pit stop. Yeah, looks like they're double stacking Tsunoda and Lawson. They've got nothing to lose. They're 14th and 15th. And they're both putting the soft tyres on. Makes sense of that, because I can't. But we have 5 retirements now. Hulkenberg, Perez, Stroll, Colapinto, and Ocon. And your order on lap 41 under a safety car yet again. Actually, I'll go through it in a moment. So this is what happened with Perez. Exit of the third to last corner. And he says, oh, fuck. And either his engine let go, because that can happen. You can spin when your engine just stops like that through a corner, especially at that speed. Either that happened or he spun on his own and then retired out of shame, which really is what he should be doing in terms of his career. But yeah, Max and Lando replay of them into turn one. Hard but fair defense, and Max keeps the lead, as also hard but fair defense on Piastri from Leclerc, who vitally holds on to third. But Max got that restart all wrong, as is Gasly, who went deep. And then Russell took fifth. And then Russell got engaged in a fight of his own with Sainz. And then Sainz, I think, got relegated back down behind Gasly somehow. Probably went wide. Here's a replay of Piastri trying to pass Leclerc. Round the outside. Piastri let Leclerc go through. He did the switchback, got a great exit. And then went for another switchback because Leclerc went wide. The problem is, again, McLaren just didn't have the straight line speed to pull enough of ahead that Piastri could then take the advantage into the corners. And then, yes, Sainz had a massive oversteer moment, and that's why Gasly got back past him into turn 6. A good move from the gas man. And then Hulkenberg spun because he went flat through turn 9 and then got way too close to the car ahead in the dirty air and spun. So pretty poor mistake for Hulkenberg. And he is out of this race. As a safety car, as Lando Norris under investigation for failing to slow under yellow flags. You'll see what happens with that. But we're on lap 42 and the safety car is about to come back in. But let me just go through the order quickly. It is Verstappen, Norris, Leclerc, Piastri, Russell, Gasly, Sainz, Alonso, Zhou and Magnussen. That is your top 10. Albon is 11th, Hamilton 12th, Bottas 13th, and then Tsunoda and Lawson, the last two cars on the track. I have no idea who is on what compound, so I'll have to update that as we go along, guys. But Max has got to make sure he gets the restart right this time, because the restart he did a couple laps ago was horrendous. And this time he gets it right, goes for it on the entry into the final corner, and yeah, he has got it bang on. And now Lando Norris very much under threat from Leclerc. Down the pit straight, then come the Ferrari, so much quicker in a straight line than the McLaren. And Leclerc going to take that outside line. Is he? No, he's going to look more for the switchback, and no, he doesn't really put on an attack. That wasn't great from Leclerc, but I guess he tried. But that was Ferrari's chance to beat both McLarens right there. As a lot of the drivers weaving around to try and warm their tyres up. As Albon has got up to 10th. Albon is on soft compound tyres. Lewis Hamilton has dropped to 14th. Both Mercedes out there on hards, which don't seem to be working at all for them. So, yeah, there you go. So the top 7 are on the hards. Alonso is on the mediums in 8th. As Piastri on the radio saying, check the front left. I can see sparks coming from it and I have a vibration. That is what McLaren don't need. If Piastri gets a puncture now, that is big, big problems for their Constructors' Championship. as we're about to begin lap 44. And Max Verstappen 7/10 of a second clear of Norris as they come through turn 1. And Piastri seems to be okay. He's only 7/10 behind Leclerc at the moment, so he seems to be okay. And yeah, McLaren telling Oscar everything looks okay with the tyre. Yeah, Albon 10th on the soft tyre. Surely those tyres will fall away as the DRS is now enabled. Here's a replay of Albon passing Magnussen. On the restart, slipstream, Williams as Lando Norris. 10-second stop-go penalty. That is a disaster for McLaren's championship for failing to slow under yellow flags. As, yeah, Albon did ram Magnussen a bit there, but Norris, that is a disaster. And he has now got to push like crazy for this next couple laps, and then I'm pretty sure come in for the 10-second stop go. But he's going to lose so many positions. But he's trying to now pass Verstappen and try and just get away from the rest of the field as much as he can, but he can't. If Verstappen was smart, he'd back Norris up into the rest of the pack, so Norris lost more time from his penalty. As Sainz now trying to pass Gasly, but Gasly defending nicely. As Hamilton has repassed Tsunoda, so the two racing bulls at the back of the pack that is left. So, yeah, Max has just been told Lando has been given a 10-second stop go, which he needs to serve within 2 laps. Lando is going to drop. He's going to drop to the back of the field. And then he's going to have 10 laps to go, really, from the back of the field into a decent points position. Carlos Sainz has got to get on with it now. Because if Norris ends up only getting, I don't know, a few points, as Lando pits now for that penalty, if Sainz can get, say, 4th, with Leclerc in 2nd, this is the turnaround Ferrari need. As Norris comes in. What a disaster. But it's a disaster of his own making, which we have seen how many times in 2024. As Lewis Hamilton has just passed Valtteri Bottas, and Lando Norris is now last. We will see over the next, 12 laps or so, what he can do to rescue the situation. Because now, McLaren only scoring 15 points, Ferrari heading for 26. Lando asking for what? And failing to slow the yellow flag. So, yeah. Carlos Sainz, the Ferrari have got to be on his radio screaming at him, get past Gasly and get past Russell. Because if they get 2nd and 4th, that's 30 points. Compared to the 15 for McLaren, that would take the gap down to just 15 points going into next week's Grand Prix. So Sainz has got to push like his life depends on it now. But this is going to be quite an exhilarating end. This race really has turned around out of nowhere. As Max Verstappen does a fastest lap, 1:23.3 on lap 47. And Sainz looks to overtake Gasly. Of course, Gasly's not just going to let Sainz through. Gasly fighting for his life for these points for Alpine's Constructors Championship. And Zhou Guanyu in 8th. Heading for Sauber's first points of the season in race, 23 of the season. And Lewis Hamilton has now been given a drive-through penalty for speeding in the pit lane. So Hamilton is definitely out of this race in terms of being able to score points. I don't know if Hamilton could have had a worse race today. Puncture, car steering on its own, speeding in the pit lane. And here is the Magnussen Albon incident. And yeah, wouldn't be surprised if Albon gets a penalty for forcing Magnussen off the track there. He did not leave racing room, I don't think. And yeah, it's been noted. Wouldn't be surprised if there's more done about that, though. As Lando, by the way, is 11.7 behind Lawson as Hamilton now pits for this drive-through penalty. Lando's going to struggle to finish even higher than 14th because he's not catching the cars ahead of him really that quickly. So Lando, I think, really is done for as Norris does the fastest lap. So Lando will now overtake Hamilton. But yeah, Lando's not going to score a point. So this is what I mean with Ferrari. They've got to get Sainz to get a move on because Norris is not going to be able to score a point here, I don't think. Anyway, the two at the back, Norris and Hamilton on the hards. And then Tsunoda and Lawson 12th and 13th on the softs, Bottas on the mediums. And then Zhou on the hard, Alonso 7th on the medium on lap 48. And we're now on lap 49 as we're looking at Kevin Magnussen still harrying Albon, who I think is starting to suffer now on those soft compound tyres. It was worth trying with Albon because, I mean, Williams had nothing to lose as Lewis has now been told to box to retire the car. As here comes Magnussen. Needs this position and oh, what an overtake. Very aggressive around the outside and he's got it done. 9th it is for Magnussen. He's got to keep pushing though because Zhou, 3.8 up the road, maybe he can catch him. Probably not because Zhou's on fresher tyres, but we will see. And I will say, actually, Norris might be able to get the final point because the cars ahead of him, Tsunoda, Lawson, Bottas, Albon, are not going very quickly. So Lando might be able to take a point and then a point for the fastest lap as well. But we will see. Obviously, all very important when it comes to the Constructors' Championship. So Albon 10th on the soft compound tyre. Carlos Sainz on lap 50. Still within a second of Gasly, but he's not having a go at him, really. Not really putting him under serious pressure. At the minute, Alpine heading for 10 points, and that would put Alpine 5 points clear of Haas, which might decide that fight for 6th in the championship that really Haas more so deserve, but that's not how things work necessarily in Formula One. It's not about what you deserve, it's about what you can get. And Alpine have been great at that in the last few races. As Albon and Magnussen under investigation, I'm pretty sure Albon is going to get a penalty for forcing Magnussen off the track. As Max 4.5 seconds clear of Leclerc, Piastri 1.5 behind Leclerc. Really, the top four, I think, are just going to come home in the positions they're in. As Magnussen overtook Albon and then on the radio, got straight on the radio and said, "Fuck off." And then his engineer said, "Nice one, Kev." That's why we love Kevin Magnussen, because he is a proper racer. It's a shame he's going to be going away, but he hasn't delivered enough of those moments in the last year or so, I'm afraid. As still Sainz within a second of Gasly. He's not going to be able to beat Russell in this race, is Sainz. He's too far behind now. But at least can he beat Gasly? Because at least then Ferrari would come away with 28 points, which would be over 10 points more than McLaren. As Lando Norris overtakes Liam Lawson. So Lando up to 13th. And yeah, the soft compound runners really struggling now. Valtteri Bottas right on the tail of Albon. Zhou, by the way, I'm pretty sure he's going to finish in 8th because Magnussen behind is not catching him because of what I said. Zhou is on fresher tyres. Finally, Sauber, knock on wood, are going to deliver a points finish. Not that it'll get him an extra position, but at least it'll be, you know, something on the board. As lap 52. And we're looking at Norris right behind Tsunoda now. And Norris so much quicker through the middle of the final corner. Tsunoda's tyres have had it. As Norris overtakes for 12th. And yeah, Lando, as Bottas is going around the outside of Albon and goes off the track. And Albon keeps the position. Lando will be with that fight very shortly. Hopefully doesn't get in any collision or anything like that. So Norris up to 12th. By the way, make sure to stick around until after this Grand Prix, guys. Because, of course, we'll be going through what we thought of the race and obviously driver of the day and all that stuff. As Hamilton was told to box and retire the car, but he hasn't. He's still out there, so clearly wants to finish the race. Good on him. Because there's nothing wrong with the car. He's just had a multitude of problems. Temporary problems, but still big problems. As is a replay of Sainz into the final corner. Having exactly what Piastri had. Big oversteer moment and losing a lot of ground to Gasly. And Sainz could be really costing Ferrari here the Constructors' Championship. Because those extra couple points that Sainz really needs to get are crucial. And there you go. Bottas up to 10th. So Sauber heading for an extra point at the minute, but I don't think they'll keep it. Because Lando Norris is right there with them. And yeah, Albon's tyres are absolutely gone. And Norris overtakes Albon, who is going to be heading for 12th because the only runners behind him now are the other soft tyre runners. And yeah, as it stands, Lando's still not in the points. But as it stands, Ferrari scoring 26 points. For McLaren scoring 15. That's a gain of 11 points. That would put the gap down to 19 points in McLaren's favour with just one race to go. But Lando, I'm pretty sure, is going to finish 10th. Which will be not 1, but 2 extra points. So that'll be 21 points in McLaren's favour. But then if Sainz passes Gasly, it'll go back down to 19 points in McLaren's favour. So this is what I mean. Sainz has got to pass Gasly to give Ferrari a chance, really, of winning the championship in Abu Dhabi. And Norris, has overtaken Bottas. And he's 10 seconds behind Magnussen is Norris, so he's not going to pass anyone else. He's way too far behind. But Norris now in the top 10 and heading for 2 points with his fastest lap. So there you go. As Alex Albon given 10-second penalty for forcing another driver off the track. No surprise there. As is a replay of Bottas passing Albon. Bottas passing Albon out to the final corner. That's how slow soft tyre runners are now. And then Norris round the outside of Bottas easily into turn 1. So much extra grip, of course, that the McLaren has. Especially on fresher tyres. And here comes Sainz. Is this the moment? He's going to go for the inside, but Gasly has the momentum around the outside. And if Sainz is going to get it done, he's got to go for the outside line because that's how you're going to get it done. That's, it's really how it works. The momentum carries you through. As Lando does another fastest lap of 1:22.4. But Sainz, he's still got two to three more opportunities. So it's not over yet. As Hamilton is now passing Lawson down the pit straight for 14th place. Disastrous last couple Qatar Grand Prix Hamilton's had. Carlos has just got to keep it together and then really start to gain on Gasly through this final sector to give himself a chance. But Gasly starting to pull away. As is a replay of Norris probably making a mistake at turn 1. And yet running wide and through the gravel. But he's trying to push as hard as possible to try and get Magnussen ahead. Even though Magnussen's way too far ahead of him, I'm pretty sure, to be caught. As... Actually, no, Albon been given a 10-second penalty for something else. They're forcing another driver from the track. No further investigation. Very surprised about that. As lap 56. Penultimate lap. And Sainz is still 7/10 behind Gasly as they come through turn 5 and out to turn 6. So Carlos is going to have one final chance. And this final chance, if he does get the move done, it will be possibly a title winner for Ferrari if they can produce the goods next week in the UAE, as Lewis Hamilton is up now to 12th because Alex Albon, for some reason, has pitted. Don't know why, unless it was a stop-go penalty for Albon. But there you go. Let me just update the tyres, which have been doing a lot in this Grand Prix. As we are on now the final lap. And here comes Carlos Sainz. What have you got for us, Carlos? Can you get this move done? I don't think he can. He's too far away. And that might be very costly in Abu Dhabi. Because these extra couple points he would get for finishing 5th might make the difference next week as Lando does another fastest lap of 1:22.3. And Albon in last, still on the soft compound tyre. So all soft compound tyre runners ending up in the last 3 positions. No surprise about that. But in terms of the race win, it's all been about the 4 times now world champion who maybe got a tad fortunate with the safety car coming out when it did, because it could have made things awkward with Lando, but he has been faultless in this Grand Prix and pretty much faultless in 2024, which is why he is the world champion, the best driver in the world, and takes his 9th win of 2024. Max Verstappen wins in Qatar for a 2nd year in a row. Charles Leclerc finishes 2nd, his first ever podium in Qatar. Piastri 3rd, Russell 4th, Pierre Gasly 5th. That could be the difference for Alpine between finishing 6th and 7th. What a result for the Frenchman yet again. Sainz 6th, Alonso 7th, Zhou 8th. He's finally scored points. Sauber have finally scored points. Kevin Magnussen 9th. Lando Norris finishes 10th and takes a couple points for that. Bottas 11th, Hamilton 12th, Tsunoda 13th, Lawson 14th, Albon 15th, and your retirements: Nico Hülkenberg, Sergio Perez, Lance Stroll, Franco Colapinto, and Esteban Ocon. But yeah, that final 20 laps was something, wasn't it? It really, really got going eventually, but still wasn't a great race, I would have to say. I'd probably give that a 6 out of 10 at best, if I'm being generous. It was a whole lot of nothing until those tyre failures. But let me ask you guys quickly before I head off. Who do you think is driver of the day for the race in Qatar? Rook saying Zhou beats Norris and a 7-time world champion. Zote. Oh, God. But, what do you call it? Let me just, I'll switch over to the football now. Result, Liverpool have just scored again, thank God, and it's a penalty. So, yeah, Liverpool are going to win, which is great. Much rather them win the league than Arsenal or Man City, as a Chelsea fan. Right, so yeah, driver of the day options: Max Verstappen, Pierre Gasly, Zhou Guan Yu, obviously you'd have to throw in there, and I'll put Leclerc also. But my driver of the day is Max Verstappen. He, like I said, he was faultless. He was perfect. And he thoroughly deserved that race win. So yeah, let me know who is your driver of the day, and I'll wait a few minutes to see what you guys have to say. But yeah, that wasn't a great Qatar Grand Prix. As I'm just checking Twitter to see if there's any news. As what is it? I've just seen Nib actually just sent me this half an hour ago that it appears that this is Esteban Ocon's final race with Alpine. It appears that he's secured somehow an early exit by the looks of it. And looks like Jack Doohan is going to get his Formula One debut possibly next week, if I interpreted that correctly. As Rook's saying 5 seconds for Russell, who was 7 seconds ahead of Gasly, so no change in the order. Right. Okay. Let me just read your comments quick. Yeah, most of you talking about Zhou Guan Yu. Rook saying nice for Zhou and stake on Trent kick Sauer to get some points eventually. Todd saying Max with a big middle finger to the stewards. Yes. Gasly close second for driver of the day behind Zhou. I mean, if you guys want to go for Zhou, then yeah, that's fine. But I think Max was the best driver out there today. Todd saying good for Jack. Looking forward to that race. Yeah, good. I am looking forward to seeing Doohan in Formula One because he was a good Formula 2 driver and definitely deserves an opportunity. in Formula One to at least prove, like like Colapinto has, to prove his worth. And we will see. But and yeah, Ocon, I don't know if he's going to be starting at Haas next weekend, but I thought he was already officially announced that he was going to be at the Haas team next year anyway. It's supposed to be Ocon and Behrman at that team next year, which is, got to say, pretty strong lineup. Dustin Sunderland says teams and drivers going to be pissed with all the penalties. Absolutely. Well, end the poll. Not many votes, but clear winner. Max Verstappen taking it. I'll just wait till the results filter through, which they will in a moment. They'll pop up in the chat. There you go. Who do you think driver of the day for the race in Qatar is? 13 votes, 61% of you went for Max Verstappen. And yeah, I agree. Max Verstappen, driver of the day. But there you go, guys. That is the Qatar Grand Prix weekend. Before you go, just want to let you know what the plan is for the next week. So tomorrow I'll upload my thoughts after this Qatar Grand Prix, just a review, obviously, of what happened here. And then next Saturday, I will be live, and Sunday, be live both days for the final race weekend of the year. Next Saturday, I'll be live at 12:30 p.m. UK time for the final qualifying watch along of the year. Qualifying starting at 2 p.m. UK time. And then I will be live, probably with my co-commentator Niblo, for the final time of the year. Live at 11 a.m. UK time next Sunday morning, 2 hours before the race for the final Grand Prix of the year, where, remember, there is still a Constructors' Championship to be decided. So make sure to join us for that final race watch along of the year. And of course, the day after that Grand Prix, there'll be a podcast reviewing that. And then we'll get into some off-season content. But thank you guys for coming along for the content this weekend, for what's been a decent Grand Prix weekend. Nothing special. Let's hope next weekend is a lot more let's say just exciting in general and just more entertaining, and hopefully we get a exhilarating conclusion to the fight for the Constructors' Championship, with Ferrari hopefully getting a bit more closer in Abu Dhabi to make things a bit more interesting. But yeah, thank you guys for the Qatar Grand Prix. Been great to have you. Before you go, make sure to smash the like button. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new, and also make sure to make sure to join our Discord server, link below in the description and in the chat. Great place that is to keep up with the community, and when we go live, when we upload videos, stuff like that. So make sure to do all of that stuff. And yeah, like I said, podcast tomorrow will be uploaded sometime, probably in the evening, reviewing the Qatar Grand Prix. But guys, until my next stream next Saturday at 12:30 p.m. UK time, covering the qualifying session, final qualifying session of the year in Abu Dhabi, and until next weekend, the final race of 2024, race 24 of the season, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.